asking from a position of like curiosity, you find that a lot of people are very open. Right? If there's no malintent, like, and they know it, there's an open book. And I used to go on and talk to a lot of individuals, and I still do this with all my trainers, with all the people and they talk about the businesses. They ask me of like tips and tricks and all this other stuff, and I tell them all the time, I don't mind sharing it because it's not necessarily the information that you're going to capitalize on. It's that work ethic that you actually want to put in. And it goes back to what you're just saying right now, is that you have the skill set where you're like, well, I know how much I would work. I know that I can work a 6 to 6 and be very happy. I can work an 18-hour day and just be cool with it. Like I don't mind, right? I know the ability in myself. So if I wanted to start another business, I'd get infatuated into that business. And I know I'd put in an 18-hour day.
Hey guys, welcome back to the show. I'm Mario.
And I'm Peter.
And we're
Guys That Listen.
On today's episode, we got Adam Mai on. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, guys.
Tell us a little about yourself.
I am basically a serial entrepreneur. I've been around in the Orange County, born and raised around here. Moved up north for a little bit. Definitely came from rags to riches, actually. I guess you would call it, right? So I've experienced pretty much everything under the sun. My parents being immigrants coming over here, really going through I've seen them rise and fall. From being multimillionaires at a very young age, where like they succeeded in that, to losing everything and not, like basically living in a 1-bedroom apartment. Wow. And this is all before I even became like 18. So like just watching them rise and fall is something that like really stuck to me and really taught me a lot of things throughout time, right? And so even with that, I went through my adolescence, my underage, trying to chase a dream that I want to say that I think it's kind of considered the American dream, I guess, right? So you're trying to climb up the corporate ladder, do all these different things. And I got to a certain point where, in a nutshell, basically one day I had the realization that in order for me to move up in my company, my manager or the president of the area, I would call it the district area, right, would it either have to get fired, passed away, right? One of these things, like basically one of the horrible thing that you can. So it's like now you're starting to wish, because for your success, you're wishing a negative thing to somebody else, right? So I'm sitting there, I'm like,
one of us gotta go.
Yeah, exactly, right. And it was really funny because I worked for a telecommunication big corporate company. So most of the people, like, it was Sprint. So basically anybody that stayed there for years. Like, man, in the corporate world, if you're in a position of power, you're in there for they're over there for like a decade to 15 years. They don't go anywhere. Yeah. So that was a huge realization for me. And I was sitting there, I was just like, okay, so how do I turn this, into something, or try to find, and that's when I started to search. I figured out that the corporate ladder wasn't for me. And I think that really at that time that sparked my interest in knowledge as well. As a young, Asian kid, right? Vietnamese kid. I think studies is always kind of pushed upon you. And so I kind of got bored. I wasn't, I just got bored in school. So that wasn't really a path, because like I was always told that you needed to be a doctor or a lawyer, right? And I went through all that, and that's not what I wanted to be, right? But the cool thing is, once you start to find your passion, find all that stuff, I'm in a position now that, like, the other day I was asked, I do businesses, or I have businesses with doctors. I have businesses with lawyers, right? And they come to me for my expertise, right? Or they come to us to partner up with us, versus the other way. So it kind of went in a full circle, and it's not about title. I think in this world, it's really more about value and what you can do and give back, and really what you kind of bring out in people, and bring out yourself. So along the way, a lot of ups and downs, I would say. So I think to me, it's because I think that title kind of comes in with it's a funny title, right? A lot of people like to put it on to social media and they put entrepreneur because I think, and the problem with the entrepreneur is like nowadays for anywhere from $450 to $800, anybody can be the CEO of an LLC.
Oh yeah.
Unfortunately, right? So then anybody can be an entrepreneur. You can start a couple different ones. But it was one of those things where I sat there and, I've had a lot of ups and downs, meaning a lot of failed businesses. I learned from them. I loved them for what they were. I used them as a stepping stone and understood what not to do in the next business and what I also didn't want to do. So that kind of like just progressed over time. And, I'm starting to find, I want to say I sharpened my tools for years, for over a decade. Or even more than that, especially more than that, because learning sales, learning what businesses I wanted to be, what industries I wanted to be in. So in about probably in the last decade or so, really kind of hit in great strides and really focused in the industries that I like.
Nice.
And so it just kind of comes one after another. I think we were talking a little bit earlier today about like what is the underlining kind of like business model and so forth. Because I think, like if you ask me today, I even ask my parents go, what kind of business are you in? So you can go, I have a warehouse, right? That ships out logistics. I do contract manufacturing. And then they're like, what's that, right? And then I have a gym. And then you also have like event space. It's all these different types of things. So they're like, well, where do you come up with these ideas? But they all kind of stem from like one common thing for me, and that's always been commercial real estate, right? So my kind of interest is looking at the per square foot. So like whatever business I put on top of that, I'm sitting there trying to capitalize on whatever that per square feet I can do. So even in the warehouse, right, I'm looking at efficiencies, how to ship out products in a smaller square foot, facility. Right. And also doing it more efficiently to get things out the door. Very similar because you're not trying to, when you do it that way, you can cut certain costs. And that way you can be more efficient for your partners and your clients as well. So those kind of also, just kind of steamrolled, and it's always been one thing after another that kind of led me to where I'm at, I think like, for example, it's really funny because like I went from, being, a teenager loving cars, right? Fixing, I think a lot of people do this, right? We call them rice rockets. So Ali now he did the same thing. So basically one of our friends, now he's just going to different types of cars, supercars, right? So in that world, we were doing car shows. We were putting together these events to show off cars, right? And from there, I started to learn how to throw events and put the events together. And from that, there's a key aspect of it, of marketing, right? How do you get it out to, the people in society, and then that's when social media started coming around, right?
Oh, wow.
And so we're utilizing social media and all this other stuff to actually really market to the space. I still remember it to the day because like we went from car shows and then we wanted to do an after party. After party led to nightclubs, right? It's just like the small transition, but you're using the same kind of marketing skills like you do back then. I remember having 4 or 5 different, like 4 or 5, 7 like laptops and computers up. Every single one had its own MySpace, and you're sitting there sending out the same like message on like 5 different computers, right? This was mass marketing, right? Instead of going out there and putting out flyers in front of like everybody's car, this was the very first kind of things into social media, kind of like basically it was MySpace marketing, right? And then I think that kind of triggered something, and then I was already in the corporate world, and that's kind of as I was climbing that corporate world, I got into that, position where I was, I was working with a lot of there was not that much more opportunity to be had. I was the VP of the LA market, the vice president of the LA market. I basically kind of went through the ranks, went really well, and I was at a really young age, climbing up the ranks, and I did really well. But then I started to realize that in order for me to advance to the next position, my boss, which I had a good relationship with, either had to pass away, get fired, something bad happened to that person. So I just didn't really like that, especially on my conscience, right? And it's one of those things. It's like I've always loved like the ethical side of, like when you're doing business, you want to be ethical because you want to sleep at night, right? So I started to look around and just trying to see into what's out there. This naturally got me into the marketing space. Where it first started with a company called Rate Special. We're in the lead gen space that kind of focused in some of the social media. We were basically the marketing arm for Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion.
Oh, wow.
So we would do credit reports all day long, right? And then so we would partner up with Realtor.coms, like all these different ones, and do their marketing on their sites. So that's kind of like how I got. So I used what I learned when I was 18 of all this MySpace and all that stuff, mass marketing on social media, then transitioned it over to, lead gen for real estate, right? Or for credit reports. Then from there, I ran into a friend, high school friend, in one of the shows. And during that show, this was his first show. His brother-in-law was this, I want to say one of the first. They still call him to today. He's in a couple of the movies, like the .com, like movies that came out, talking about like the earlier signs of like marketing.
Tom?
So his name's Peter. So they're all in the same group, right? They're all in the same group chat. Not Tom from MySpace, but there is another Tom that's in the marketing space that focuses in health and beauty. So back then they were the main key guys that was doing like everything that you saw in Dr. Phil. Like these guys hit up first.
Oh, wow.
Right. So like every single time you see like Dr. Phil, when they were doing those like, this particular cinnamon, whatever it is, like some kind of supplement or vitamin or teeth whitening or whatever it was, right? They were doing all the marketing for it, like across the board. Well, that was his brother-in-law. So he found out, this guy loves to do research. So he was like, how do you know somebody in the space? So then immediately he took down my card, took down my name, researched the company that I worked for. And then I think about 6 to 8 months, about a year later, he approached me. He said, I am in the position, I want to buy out my partners. I want you to come and run my company.
Oh.
And so I already built a really, really strong relationship there at that time with the company that I was at. Because at that time, I made a decision, the best decision that I've ever made is that transition. When I came out, I said I would never work for another boss again. I said I would only work for mentors. So if I was talking or doing an interview, within that interview, I would interview the person that was going to be in charge of me. At that time, the owner, he's like a bigger brother to me now, right? And he even was graciously, he did everything that he said he was going to do. He said, because I was very upfront with him. I expressed to him, I said, I only want to work for mentors. And he said, okay, then if you're willing to do it and you're willing to put in the work, I'll show you everything from A to Z for this company.
Wow.
So he basically put me into like an account management role. Next thing he put me into a biz dev role. Then he put me in charge of like the call center. He put in charge of me like pretty much almost every single department. He gave me a role at one time or another for a couple months. Right, because he wanted to learn the ins and outs, and then eventually, what we did was start running his company for him. All right, so that's kind of like how that transition out for that company. And so as I was doing that, I was expressing to Peter, which is like one of my closest friends now, and a brother to me. And so I was expressing to him, I said, if I ever make this decision to go work for somebody else or to work with somebody else, there's a couple checklists that I need, right? And so one of the biggest things was it's on the personal side. I really didn't have I wanted to work, when I say personal, I wanted to feel fulfilled on the personal side. So personal life, because I was climbing up the corporate ladder, but it's like I hit every single checkbox, but I wasn't happy. Like literally wasn't happy. I was still single. Like, don't get me wrong. I was working in nightclubs. So it's not like I didn't have dates or whatever it is. And I know Ali and all those guys, right? So it's not like we didn't have,
Swinger parties.
yeah, females around us or anything like that. But it was one of those things I could never ever connect to my girlfriend at the time or people that I dated. When I say connect, I'm talking about like true intimacy, like really like that person is your person type of thing, like your soulmate type of thing, where you can actually have a true conversation. It's just like this. Whenever you go out into the world, you typically put on a very, persona. Nightclubs is a persona, right? And so you got to look polished. You got to look great. You got to look all these different things. But usually when you go home, you want to take off that, right? You want to feel comfortable in your own skin. If you love rom-coms, right? Like I really don't know. Like I was sitting there and I'd make jokes because, there was things that I did like, right? And if you like, I don't know, Justin Bieber pop, like you would feel comfortable with that person to express anything that you would like to express. I just never felt that connection with a lot of people. That's also because I never felt that connection with myself. I never truly was able to love myself for who I am. And I was always trying to climb up this corporate ladder, right? And I joke about it still to this day. And I know I say this to all my family and all that stuff too, is because I had daddy issues. I truly did, right? I have one of these things where it's like, my father, he was the youngest of the family, but he was one of the first to hit success. So he carried his brothers along with him, which is, and I understood that. I learned that greatly from him. But with that also, he had to always put out an image. There was always an image that he had to put out. So I thought that was the case, right? I thought, people had to do that. So that kind of carried with me, and I just really didn't. It's almost like you climb up. You're told to do these things, become this title, make this amount of money, and you get there, and you're like, "The f am I doing?" Like I really don't care for this.
You are in a great space here because we all got daddy issues.
Yeah,
This is a very safe space.
yeah, and it's really funny. And I speak about it super confidently now because I'm like, I don't care. I do, and that me speaking confidently about it makes me it actually helps me become a better father.
I think so too.
So much. It's just, to me, it allows me to focus on the things that I wanted as a child. And I felt that a father, could have done, should have done. But at the same time, the difference that I can be a little bit now is that I don't hold that against my father. That I think that was like the key part for me, because I would always sit there and be like, when I was my father, I'm going to do this because my father didn't do it for me. Right. And I was like, wait. There's a blame shift in there. There's a blaming in there, and there's a negative outcome to that. While nowadays I'm like, well, I'm going to do these things because I have the freedom and the liberty to do it. Right? I've created this space. I've created the safe space and the environment that I can do it at. While my father probably didn't have the opportunity or have that ability to do so. He was so busy and so focused on certain things because he thought that was the priority, and it could be. I'm not saying that it's not, meaning like making, security for your family, working hard, doing all these things. Not saying they're not important. It's just, you also have to look at what's important to your family, right? There's two sides to it, right? And so as I'm going through there, I really was looking for a mentor in that. And Peter was the guy. He didn't have everything together either at that point, but he was definitely ahead of me when it came to the personal life. And he was so focused in it. That was like his thing. He was just like, how do I juggle being a serial entrepreneur? This was his thing. A full-time father, right? A good friend, like all the titles that you could, and his goal was to be the best at each part of these things.
Oh, wow.
Right? So if my friend, as a friend, as one of my brothers, if he needed me, how can I be there all the time? Full attention, everything. If my wife needed me to be there, how do I do that? Right? Full attention, all that stuff. And it's also be with his with his kids and so forth, and just watch them grow and help them. And that was the relationship that started to build. And I saw a lot of things I can learn from him. I still am learning from him every single day, because the cool thing about our relationship is this. One thing about mentorship, a lot of mentors don't want you to surpass them.
Oh.
It's their ego talking, but they lose that kind of like that leadership, that management, like all that. So that so a lot of mentorships, you get to a certain point where you kind of it goes away, or the relationship just kind of like fades out. That's not what he wanted out of the relationship. I wanted a mentor. He didn't want a mentee. He wanted a brother. So that's the difference. Because a lot of times when you're looking for a mentor, the mentor wants a mentee.
Yeah.
Right? So then if you guys both play that role, then it stays well. But at least as soon as someone changes, then it kind of shifts off. He was looking for brothers. He was looking for friends. He was looking for partnerships. He really wanted that community and that vibe and other people to understand where he was coming from. So over time, we were kind of just cultivating this partnership, and this. When I say partnership, really mean friendship. And it took me a while to make a transition over to his company. I think we got to know each other over the next 8 months. And then when I made a transition out of my old company, I asked for another 6 months to make a transition. So overall, before I left the other company, it was like over a year.
Wow.
This is why I love this podcast, because I feel so inspired to go buy commercial real estate, talk to my father, and find a mentor right now.
I used to go back to the family, and they would ask me what I've been up to, right? And a part of me always, because I was at one point the golden child when I was first born. Then over time, I became the black sheep of the family. So it's a weird thing. Let's put it this way. When I was born, our family named a business after me.
Wow.
Yeah.
After your Adam or your Vietnamese name?
Adam. It was Adam's Cleaner. It was as simple as that.
Adam's Cleaner?
Yeah.
You guys did janitorial?
No, they were what you call it? Dry cleaning.
Oh, okay.
Doing a dry cleaning business. So, and we were raised in the church. Our grandfather founded the church back in Vietnam, so it was brought over here. So we were very into the Christianity church. But it was just I used to go back to the family, and at one point or another, I felt I think in the beginning I used to feel the need to like, kind of almost like prove to them that I'm okay. Yeah. So I'd sit there and like almost like roll off your tongue, like this is what I've done, this is what what I've been doing and doing all this stuff, right? After a while, you just kind of, when you start to be happy and be okay with yourself, it just doesn't happen as much anymore, right? And when I was going and I was seeing them, it was more of like, oh, so I read this about you, or I saw this tell me more about this, or else I'd just sit in the corner and just be kind of quiet about it.
Is that because the way you saw your father grow up? And
Yeah.
how putting that kind of like face and like how you're supposed to present yourself?
Yeah. So I always thought that like, that was showing confidence, but that actually is not confidence. Right? So I thought the person that the loudest in the room, and I used to be taught this, the loudest person in the room is the most confident in the room, right? The most bravest. It's actually not.
Yeah.
Right? And the most confident person in the room is the one that's quietest in the room. Usually. Right? And Not saying that they don't speak or anything like that. They want to speak up when they can actually add value. And they were just more strategic with it. And that's what like. You can feel this confidence in the, like the, I want to say the groups of people that I hang out with now. I'm always like, I always tell her, like, even my parents right now, and I tell my mom, I was like, I love being the dumbest one in the room. I fucking love it. Yeah, I was like, I love it. It's like when I hear other people speak, I'm like, I love it. It's awesome because I'm sitting there learning every single day, and that's where that thirst of knowledge kind of came in. And really, they teach me everything under the sun, and not only them, but like, and when I say them, I'm talking about the group of guys that I'm with. But even more so is the group of women that we're with. Like our wives, gosh, man, they're some intelligent beings. Like I think that's where we kind of, I had to learn more. Because like what I mean by I had to learn more was I was always taught in this old way of like the men lead the family, right? So what the man says, it goes. Very freaking traditional, very archaic and all that stuff. Like there is certain parts of it that is kind of true. So it's kind of like it is a partnership, right? True partnership. So the men do go out there and protect so that the women can thrive and be the North Star. Mm-hmm. They see things that like most of us just don't. When I mean by that, it's just like they're very meticulous. They're very not just, they're sympathetic, they're loving, they're caring, and they know just how to stay on the right path. And sometimes, for not saying all, but some men just, we get swayed by all the shiny things out there, right? But also, I mean, that's what you kind of go out there and kind of see, right? So the group just, I'm just blessed. I feel very, very blessed to be a part of them. And it didn't happen overnight. It cultivated over a decade, and it went through the same things of like any kind of relationship. When I first met them, it was very surface, very surface, very about business. What you can do for me. It's interaction based and all that stuff. And then over time, you kind of open up a little bit. You do these little things. I still remember, like, I used to work for the company, do it really well, and his sister-in-law, which is Peter's sister-in-law, it's my close friend from high school, his wife. She worked for the company as well, and she shocked the living crap out of me because I never had this done before. Because I was sitting there, I was the VP, I was the vice president, I was running the whole entire company, and I was making sure everything was doing right. Multi-million-dollar company, doing all that stuff. She would just come into my room and sit down, close the door. How are you doing? And I'd sit there, I'm like, what's up? And she's like, how are you doing? I go, doing fine. What do you mean? She's like, how are you doing? And I'm like, did something happen? Right? And I was like, his number's good. Did someone say something? And everything in my mind went negative. And she was just purely trying to ask me if I was okay. And she was just trying to be a friend. And it was the most just strange thing that I've never had before. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm 30-something years old. And I never really, and that was like I'm not saying it's never have, but I'm saying it's very few that someone truly asked you, how are you doing? And truly cared, how are you doing?
Adam, how are you doing?
I'm doing great.
So earlier you mentioned a little bit about the perception you had of your father and how he was successful and the face he had to put up and how that related to what you considered success or someone, who gets to that level has to act like. And you talked a little bit about how you're climbing the ladder and you're not happy. And for me, it's always been like when you're hustling, you're trying to have self-discovery in the self kind of becomes a low priority, and that's stuff that I've had to battle in my perception of my father as well. So I wanted to ask, now that you seem like you're more self-aware and happy and successful, how has your relationship with your father changed?
The relationship with my father, it's cultivated however I want to do, right? And I think that's where a lot of people fall into these, I want to say, cycles, or just like, so it's like this. What I mean by that is you get to a certain point where your father is no longer your father. It really isn't, right? So yes, I had this image of my father. He was my father up till the age of 14, 15, whatever. After I started, understanding and cultivating my own path as a human, as an individual, right? You come back, there is still a title, right? Which I totally understand. That person is still your father. That person is still your mother. But the relationship is no longer the same, right? Because that person is there's one of two roles that it typically falls underneath, is because, and we always joke about this, is like, you were a father, you were a mother until that person learned how to wipe their own ass, right? And then that after your child learns how to wipe their own ass, then what you become is you either become a coach, right? And you're trying to coach them, and as a mentor, and you're trying to lead them to the next phase, right? And yes, the title is still the same. Meaning the title as a father, but it gets to a point where I had to realize he was never my coach. He was more of a friend, right? And it's a little bit difficult, because I even had a hard time with it, saying he's more of a friend than a father to me, because I kept on tying the title to it, and I thought, one, I'm doing him a disservice. Or one, I'm not getting out of him what I would like from a father.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if I'm so focused on that, that's focused to the past. I can't cultivate a relationship with him now, right? Because, like, let's say, for instance, if you have here's the difference where I'm like kind of pointing some of these things out, is like where it's that cross is it's like you having a childhood friend, and then you had a friend that you just met, recently.
Oh.
Right? So if you connect more to the person now, does it matter that that person was not a childhood friend of yours? Does it make it anything different? Right? Does it make that like your relationship is that much less, is not as strong because that person wasn't someone you knew since childhood? It really isn't, right? What really matters is what you put into it, right? If you cultivated the friendship that you met just last month, and you guys are so on the, you and that person the values are the same, right? The focus is the same. The conversations are great, and it's amazing. It doesn't matter if it's a childhood friend. The relationship is just as strong, right? So that's what I kind of like had to like start over with him, because I sat there and I'm like, I'm holding on to something that is like an image that I had. So I'm always putting these expectations underneath. And I was so attached to those expectations, because every single time he would try something new, in my back of my mind, even though I didn't say it, I would go, why didn't you do it back then?
Oh.
Does it make sense?
Yeah.
So like, oh, well, you're doing it now, but why didn't you do it back then?
Yeah.
When I needed you. You want to talk to me now? And you want to be a part of my life? Why weren't you back then when you were part? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like this attachment to this expectation that was from, long ago. But then that stops you from building the relationship now, because you're living in the past. You're not living in the now. And a big part of that, like I was struggling with that, and I kept on flipping, and I just, I was getting confused as what he was trying to do. Right. What I mean by that is like, sometimes he would just give advice or talk, and I would sit there and think that he was trying to take control. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Was that just your perception of it?
It's just
Okay.
like, oh, you should look out for this person, or you shouldn't do it this way. And I'm like, are you trying to control? Like, well, you're my kid, so you should listen to me. Yes, the verbiage sometimes sounds,
But you have to go beyond that.
you have to go beyond that,
Yeah.
because what they're saying is not really,
Yep.
because deep down inside, he knew he couldn't control me.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's his best way of trying to parent you,
Yes.
the way he knows, even though he's not purposely trying to control you. It's like just the language that he speaks, you know?
Exactly, because like that's how he was the best way to express it to me. But I was sitting there, I was so attached to it. I was like, "Why are you trying to control me? Like, like you're giving me advice about business, and then you kind of you roll your head back, and you're like, but your business has failed, and you did this, and you did this. Well, he's trying to tell you like what he learned from those, right? But I didn't know that until I started failing, and I go, wow, I actually learned a lot more from my failures than actually my successes. Sometimes.
I think that's such a big part of like letting go of your own ego and like just letting go of blame that you have.
Yeah.
Because I've experienced something similar with my father, maybe not to that extent, where it's like I know what he was like when I was younger, and he wasn't always there. He was always working. And in my head, I knew that I'm like, you're working to provide for the family. And now that we've gotten older, he's become more emotionally available. We have talks, like we talk more. And for a while, I was like, where was this when I was little? Where was that? And I got to the point where I'm like, I also like just like, dude, it doesn't matter. Like you said, you can't cultivate a relationship if you're still holding on to the past. Like you're still holding on to these like, why did you do that? Why didn't you do that when I was a kid? And a lot of it has been like, I hear the way my father talks, and I hear the things that he says, and I know that the meaning behind it isn't always the words.
Yep.
Sometimes I'll like get annoyed. I'm like, why are you saying this? And I'm like, you just mean you mean your best.
Yeah.
You want the best for me. Like I know you're trying to like either parent me, coach me, give me advice, and I try and look beyond the words, and I'm like, and beyond my own annoyance. I'm like, do you really need to say this to me? I'm like, oh, okay, I get it, Dad. Yeah. And I try and like get to the root of what he's saying, and connect with him there.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And
It's so strange because like I used to be that kid that was like, oh my gosh, like I'd make fun of my parents. I'd be like, I'm never gonna get that old. I'm never gonna be like that. I'm never gonna be so worrisome and all this other stuff, right? Okay, so like here's the thing. Like I think to my degree, like I've been to all these different events, concerts, Coachella, like all that stuff. So I thought I had a pretty fun life. However, there's a new generation that speaks, and the way that they speak, I'm like, what did you say?
on God.
Yep. I'm like, wait, what does that mean? I don't get that, right? And there's this huge. So to go back to the point, your parents are speaking, like as I'm talking to him, even now, he's from a different generation that's using different languages and different words, right? Because I see it firsthand now that I'm having conversations with the next generation, and I'm like, what did you just say? Like, and it was really funny because I have, like I was sitting there. This is one of the biggest, funniest ones. I was helping one of the guys out, and I was giving him advice, and he would sit there and tell me, say less. And I go, what? And I was like, and I like turned, and I was like, what the, like you're a prick. Like, what, you just telling me to shut up? And he's like, nah, say less. I'm like, okay. And then I would like stop slowly. I didn't know until later on. I was like, oh, so basically he just agrees. You know what I mean? Like he's just listening, and like he's on board. Also, I just did not know that.
Yeah.
It shows a big gap. So like I take that in same consideration as in when I'm speaking to my parents, right? The beauty of it though, the beauty of that when I started to honor them and express to them that their voice does matter and and I'm listening. Because I think one of the things that we don't do well is that we don't do this where we send out the confirmation, right? So like for instance, my dad or my mom will tell me something and I'm listening to them. We don't return with a confirmation like, oh, I understand this. Oh, I get this. And because of that, they think that you're not listening, so they're worried. But then I've done this where I go back and I go, so I take that in consideration. It might not work in this situation, but I hear what you're saying, right? And as the more that I'm doing that, there, like even my parents came back to me. It was like, dude, we were great serial entrepreneurs, but you surpassed us. Like what you, I mean, like I can't tell you, I can only tell you some of the things that we have. And the main big thing with my mom all day long, which she sits there, and even my father, what they tell me now, my mom's like, all she reminds me, she's like, when it comes to business, you're surpassed me. Like whatever you've done, it like basically, yeah, we did this, but you're on projects that I would have never even thought of. However, the thing I can remind you is do things with your heart, right? Believe in and make sure that love the people that's around you. And so she still is like what my wife is to me is my North Star, right? So every single time if I hesitate on something, they can see it. They're still giving me feedback. So they can see it within myself. They were like, yeah, maybe that makes sense logically, but your heart's not into it. So you're not passionate about it.
Yeah.
Don't do it. That's the feedback that they can definitely give me. And that's actually really good and very strong, valuable feedback that I actually need. Because especially when it comes to like entrepreneurship, sometimes you move forward because it's a great deal.
Yeah.
You move forward is because it's a great opportunity. And you're like, well, that's money. Like, but the thing is, you're not gonna be happy doing it.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's where sometimes because the thing is, if it's just a great deal, it will only last so long. If it's something that you really want to do and you're passionate about, dude, you can blow that up into something way bigger. Right. And it expands into other things. And that's what a lot of like the businesses that I've loved have done for me. They expanded into something else. They connected me with the people that I'm connected with today,
Did you feel like you were like you had to get under the out of their shadow because they had like they were successful, up and down, had all these entrepreneurial business and stuff? Did you feel you had to do that as well?
Yes and no. Yes, meaning they gave me a path that wasn't right. Meaning, like they said, if you want to get out of my like in a same sense, right? And like if you want to do better than me or surpass me as your parents, you need to go to school. You need to get these degrees because that's the way that they put it to me. It's not that they didn't want me to be successful. They were just giving me a different path. They're like, hey, so we had to do this and we don't want you to struggle as much, right? We don't want you to have to learn from scratch and do all this stuff. So we're going to tell you like, hey, get some of these degrees under your belt. These things are going to help you surpass us, right? But where they didn't understand was I didn't desire for that knowledge yet. I didn't have a usage for that. And it's just like, I got my master's like way later on. I can tell you all the things I learned in my master's program. I can tell you nothing that I learned in my undergrad. Like even the test, I don't even know. I don't even know what classes I took. Right. And I could tell you now, like the books that I read and the courses that I take now or the certification, whatever it is now, I can tell you down to the T of everything that's in that book. But if you told me and asked me what I learned in certain classes back then, I couldn't tell you at all. The reason why is my desire wasn't there.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And even the books that I read now, sometimes it'll pop up in my head, the saying or whatever it is. And I go back to the book and I read the whole entire chapter over again because I was like, oh yeah, this stuck out so well to me. I need that. And that thirst for knowledge. I've always had that thirst for knowledge, but it wasn't pointed in the right spot because I think someone else was trying to tell me what I should be thinking.
No, I definitely vibe with that because I didn't start to like really, really like desire wanting to know more or get smarter till I was like pretty much out of college, where I found myself like studying and like reading books. So I'm like, what? Why wasn't I doing this in school? Like when I was in actual college.
Yeah.
And it just takes some kind of switch. It takes a mindset to like really point yourself in that right direction. We had a guest on here who he thought he was dumb in high school. He thought he wasn't like that good. He became one of the top 10 players in this video game. It's called Heroes of New Earth. It's kind of like Dota. And he's like, wow, I'm top 10 in the world. Like, I'm pretty good. And it just shifted his mindset to like, oh, I can actually like try and point this in, a school or like, something for my success. And he ended up taking one of those boot camps, worked for like, a Fortune 500 company, and all because he had like, he became really good at this video game and just was like, oh, I am good at stuff. I just need to like, kind of shift my mindset. And that's it.
See, that's the thing too. Like for me, I knew I wasn't stupid, right? I was that kid that like in school. So like early on, I was in everything advanced, AP classes, all that stuff, doing math competitions. I don't freaking know, like all these things that my parents used to take me.
Oh my
to.
God, they must have been so proud of you.
Yeah, and I was like earning all these. But then when I started to get into high school, I started getting bored because what they did was I was moving around so much. What happened was I was in all these AP classes, and then I started being put back into regular high school, public school, and so I was getting put into classes that I learned like 4 or 5 years before that. Right, I was all of a sudden put back into algebra. This was the funniest thing, and I wish no other parent ever does this, and they need to pay more attention to this. So, born and raised, right? I was born in Chapman Hospital down the street, right? But when I was raised, Vietnamese is my first language because I was raised by my grandma, right? But when you're going to school, you shouldn't write down that Vietnamese is the first language. Because then I got put in the ESL classes, English as a second language. And I was a seventh grader. I got put in the class. I could speak English very well. I learned I went to, and everybody's like having broken, I got so bored. Everybody was broken English. Everybody was learning as English. But it was the lack of attention from my parents at that time. Right. It just happened to have a small blip, right? And don't get me wrong, there was a lot of things that was going on during that time, with the family. This was, and I think I mentioned it before, was like we had the ups and downs, right? Meaning the family was multimillionaires at one point and then lost everything at another. So there was a lot of things. I'm not trying to blame it. It was just one of those things that I didn't even know even happened until I was in an ESL class. And they couldn't take me out till like a semester later. So I got super bored in school. And because I was so bored, and the more that idle hands, right? The more that you're bored, the more that your ADHD kind of pops out, all this other things, your mind runs around, and you're unable to control some of those things, and so it runs a mile a minute, and then all of a sudden you just really can't focus on anything. It's more of lack of focus and lack of prioritization, and being bored, right? Especially in that. And the moment that I started to find the shift was when I started challenging myself. I started looking for things that were more challenging to me, right? And that's what kind of brings back my focus on everything that I do. That was a huge like game changer. And then when you do that, because I used to sit there and be like, well, school's not for me. Mm-hmm. And I would sit there and here's the thing. People say these things. This is the challenge I have for everybody. Go back and ask if that's real. So as you go, school's not for me, right? Is school really not for you?
It's funny. I think about that, and my mindset now, I'm like, if I had the same mindset when I was in school, then I'm like, dude, easy. Like,
yeah. See?
So easy.
So it's not school as a whole, right? So then you have to pick and choose, and so that's the same thing. I would agree. If you sat there and asked me in that moment, I'd be like, no, school's not for me. If you ask me right now, dude, I'd love to go back to school. Like
me too.
I love, like I would sit there and I would be stuck listening to professors all day. Oh. If you could teach me something, and that technically is and I would have to say, that is technically my group of friends. They're like, to me, I'm always a quiet one, and they're always teaching me something. It's about real estate, Airbnb. Like, they know everything under the sun. I'm like, damn, what the heck? Like,
honestly, this actual podcast like this is kind of like that, because we have people on here who have this knowledge, and they come on here, they talk about their business, talk about what they're doing, and I was like, it gives you like little bits of knowledge and inspiration, and I'm like, oh man, I learned something new today.
Yeah.
I learned either something about business, I learned something about someone's upbringing, or I learned something about family, or like I feel more motivated. And every time we have someone on here, I'm like, dang, I feel just a little more well rounded.
Yeah. And so it's just more of like you shifting certain things, right? And I don't think that any of us are that limited, right? We all can be whatever we would like to be. We just use these types of verbiages so we can not have to accept the I guess the negative side to things. Meaning I said those things because everybody else was telling me that school is something that I should do. Right? I wouldn't have made that comment if people just didn't really care. Or if I really didn't care that, right? Because like you wouldn't have to say, like my wife never sits there and goes, yeah, school's not for me. She never says that, right? Because no one ever like kind of pushed her to pursue that. But she is so, when it comes to her creativity, when it comes to art, when it comes to all like she's, dude, like she blows me out of the park. And I come from a background of like interior designing, furniture business, all that stuff. But then she still takes it to another level, and I just leave it up to her. I mean, like she does paintings, she does all, so that creative side of things, she just captures it.
Is she the boss of the house?
Is she the boss of the house? Yeah, she is.
Remember when we had Andy on here? He's like, he's like, yeah, throughout the day, I'm doing this, running these businesses here. Come home. Okay. Yes, babe.
No. The funniest thing I was asked. So the wives got together and they're looking at me and like our group of guys, right? They're like, so how do you guys go out there every single day from 9 to 5 and you guys are all president, CEO, and you guys run these multi-million-dollar companies and you guys lead 400 people, 200 people, do all these things. You come in the house at 6 o'clock, your brain turns off. And then we all start laughing. It's like, you guys become like these shell of what you guys are out there. And then we started laughing. I was like, because you guys are the boss. Out there, people look to us that we have to do something. Now when we go home, we look to you guys, right? And then they all laughed and they're like, okay. They're like, I go, hey, that's the thing, and that's for once we don't have to. And that's okay for us. Mm-hmm. And we're 100% okay with it. And, to be quite honest, like, I don't think my wife needs my feedback for half the stuff, Like she loves to hear my opinion, which is great. But like I always joke with her, I go, I don't even know why you asked for my opinion. She goes, why? I go, because you already made up your mind. Like she'll sit there and like she'll go, babe, which shoes should I wear? She'll give me 2 choices. And then I'll be like, yeah, wear the, the Yeezys or whatever it is. And then she goes, nah, I like the Nikes instead. I'm like, well, then why'd you ask? And I go, dude, 5 for 5. She always goes with the opposite one.
Maybe that's why.
Every single one. And I'm like, and then one time I try to throw the opposite. And then she goes, you got it once right this time. I was like, damn, you really just don't. Yeah. But yeah, it's really amazing. I mean, she loves that. She loves that domain. Me and my wife, when
how did you guys meet, by the way?
We met through my business partner now. I worked for one of his companies. He is we used to have. He was in the online marketing space, like I mentioned. He created all the vendor services. So you can come to his company, he basically. And let's say, for instance, you're starting up a brand. If you're starting up a brand, any kind of like in the health, he was focused in the healthcare. Health and beauty, not healthcare, health and beauty business. So like a Clarins or any kind of business like that, when you typically talk about a company like that with skincare, they have everything, meaning like they're vertically integrated. Mm-hmm. So that company has a marketing team. That company has a call center for your customer service. That company has a fulfillment center that ships out their products. That company also has like, let's say for instance, chargeback companies, merchant processing, like all this other stuff, right? So the way he did it was he went in around it, and he was an advertiser. So he started to see all the things that these vendors were dropping the ball on. So then he started to create his own versions of them. So he started to create his own call center. And you could take that a la carte if you ever need customer service for that particular brand, right? And then you would need, and at that time I was working with, I was part of his marketing company, and I was doing the marketing for like Christy Brinkley, Ronnie Coleman, these muscle supplement guys, right? And every single time I do these nice drops and nice marketing campaigns, and then we were in performance marketing, meaning we based our revenues, or we based our payouts based on what you sold. So it's based on performance marketing. It's not like the old school Saatchi and Saatchi, like all those guys, where they would say, hey, for this particular campaign, pay me $100K. Yeah. It's a flat rate. We never did that. What we would do is kind of very similar to what we have now is performance marketing. So you create a performance ad or whatever it is, you would make a CPA, like a cost per action. So every single sale that came in, or every single action item that you wanted, we'll take a piece of that.
Yeah.
Right. That's the performance marketing outside. So it's like almost like you can call it a commission, you can call it a bonus. But so you kind of almost bring in your marketing team, like they get having skin in the game, right? And lack of better words, right? So they have skin in the game so they'll sit there and they'll dissect everything. So what I was getting at was like, I was doing all this marketing efforts for all these guys, and my sales would go down after, like, I would capture the target, and all of a sudden we call them LTV. So the second round, third round of these clients, the sales would drop off. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? Then I started to do more research into these companies, right? Or like the sales flow. And I started to see that, like, hey, you're promising a client, and this is when Amazon started getting big and all that stuff. So you're competing against the Amazon lifestyle where you're ordering something, you get it in 48 hours. At that time, it wasn't the Prime one day yet, but it was like at 48 hours. So it was 2 days, 2 to 3 days. These other ones that we were sending out was coming in 7 days, right? 7 to 10 days. And I was like, you lost your customers. Like you lost basically that hype, right? That excitement that they did when they bought that particular product. So you lose that. The second, the way it was getting shipped was horrible. I was just like, meaning brown box looks all the crap. Like, even if it's a brown box, you need to make it look nice, right? So they were losing the appeal of all these different things. So that's when we were having that conversation, like, and he expanded into that. And he created that, and that's when we saw the need of that. And eventually that's how I went into the fulfillment side of things too with him. Now, take 2 steps back, how I met my wife was she was his executive assistant for a parent company, right? And then over time, she started like learning his ins and outs, everything, and she became the chief of staff for all his companies. Nice. We didn't work together technically because I was already on like running our companies. She was more on the new companies that's coming in, right? So we didn't really cross paths that much, but we knew of each other, right? And it was just kind of funny. Like, so the funny thing is, I always thought he was trying to hook us up, but he wasn't. And when we told him that we were dating, he was like so shocked. And he was like, oh my God, I'm so happy for you guys. Well, how did this cultivate? And I was like, what? What are you talking about? There was a period of time where, we were winning a lot of these awards. So Peter had won Entrepreneur of the Year by EY. Oh, and so we were going to these shows and these events, these galas, like all these things, right? And because I was running his companies, we were invited, obviously, all together. It was for the company, right? So he would call me up and he was like, yeah, so, hey, it's going to be me, my wife, and he starts naming off the people that's coming. So it's all the high execs of the company. He goes, we're all married. So we're going to go to, we're all going to go in couples. And since you and Erica are single, you guys should carpool together. And he would do this over and over and over. He's like, well, since you two are single, and he would point that out every single time. I was like, are you trying to set something up or anything? But but it was just funny. Maybe it's his subconscious, like unconsciously, he thought we were gonna get together. I don't know. But yeah, it was amazing. I mean, we became friends first, you know, and just cultivated from there. We became friends and just trying to understand each other. And it was kind of funny because I think when we first dated, the common thing everybody said was, she doesn't look like your type. Right? Like, he doesn't look like your type and she doesn't look like your type. And the answer we had was, maybe that's what it needs to be.
What was your type?
I think I went through a series of, I think because of being in the nightclub, it was just like bottle service and go-go dancers. Like, you know what I mean? Like you just, even as much as I tried and I said, okay, I'm not going to date anybody that's in this industry, you still end up dating somebody in the industry.
No more bottle service girls.
Yeah. Or it's the bottle service girl's friend or the go-go dancer's friend, you know, whatever it is. It was always been that case. And so it's the same thing. And so, yeah, that was just kind of, it happened. And she's not that type. And, you know, she challenges me in every single way. I think it wasn't like the relationship where like just everything is all freaking magical and stuff. We challenge each other literally down to the T. And I think that was the best because it made us learn about each other. And it made us like, you know, like we even say it to this day, we're like, I don't get rallied up except when she knows how to push my buttons. You know what I mean? It's like that. She's the only one, right? But she's also the one that like sees the potential. She will sit there and she is literally my North Star. She'll sit there and be like, this is great. Logically, this looks like it's money, but it's not. Right? And I'll be like, what do you mean? She's like, yeah, it looks like the shiny nickel, but you have no passion in it. What value can you bring to it? And I think that's where we kind of come into play where like now we're getting a true understanding. Like there's a lot of opportunities out there. Cause I get people all the time. Oh, look at this deal. Look at that deal. Look at this opportunity. But if you're not going to bring any value into it, it's better to kind of let it go because time is harder to get back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Time is harder to get back. Opportunities, if you can let a couple go, opportunities will come and go. It's your time that is like, you know, that you can't get back.
Would you say the younger you had that same mindset? And would you give that as advice to someone? Because sometimes when you're starting off and you're up and coming, you can't always choose what to be passionate about. Like if you have a good opportunity, sometimes the money's worth it.
Yeah.
You know?
There is, okay, so this is where, would I change anything from back then? No, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
I wouldn't at all. The reason why is so my big thing that I don't like what the next generation is doing, I learned this from my father because my father was doing this a lot. He would take shortcuts, right? When I say shortcuts, meaning like you're just not, let's say, for instance, someone comes up with a really good idea. You're trying to speed through the process. You create a company doing all this stuff. You didn't earn the rights for that company. You didn't build a foundation. Just like I was saying, people, all of a sudden, the second part of real estate, I worked for a broker for a couple years. Now I think I'm good, great. Then I'm going to go in there, start my own LLC, and now I can be the CEO of my company, right? The problem is 2-3 years is not good enough for you to build a foundation. It's really difficult. That's sometimes why some of these brokerage firms or anything like that, mortgage, they've built a strong foundation. Not saying that you have to do that your entire life, but learn what you can. It's like you get what you're going to get out of it. That's why sometimes I worked for corporate. I learned a lot of stuff from corporate. There was a lot of things that was instilled with me. So I'm not sitting there telling everybody like, oh yeah, just go off and start your own, business. Because when I was working for a corporate, I was learning and sharpening my tools how to run this. Because when I created another company or I create a company, I had the routine and I had what I wanted to do in every single thing like that. I would tell everybody else all the freaking time. if you didn't know how to work a 9 to 5, you won't work a 9 to 5 for yourself, right? You actually should work harder for yourself, right?
Yeah.
So, and people miss that a lot because a lot of people go into business themselves and they go, well, I went into business myself so I can have some freedom.
Sometimes you have less freedom
Yeah.
working for yourself.
Exactly. So I don't work a 9 to 5. I work like a, like,
24/7.
yeah, basically, right? So I had to learn all those things. And that's why I don't like to, to me, don't take shortcuts, right? So I rather learn things from scratch. And when I want something, I like deep dive. It's a knowledge base. I want to know everything about that, right? I don't care if it's like, even if it's to the tiles or to the backsplash or whatever. Even when you're talking about real estate, right? Everything down to the, like when we were doing the gym, on that side, I was picking and I was figuring out which, vinyl I wanted because I was like, oh, this is going to be a studio for the gym. And I was like, all right, well, think about it. What would you do? Right. And we were thinking about like people's types of shoes and types of equipment. So we grabbed equipment, like we would take the vinyl plank, take the equipment and start dragging over the equipment to see if it's scratched.
Yeah.
Because if it's scratched and you're throwing freaking weights on it, within 2 months it's gonna look like crap, right? And so like little things like that, right? So I wanted to learn all that stuff. I didn't want to pass it along and take shortcuts on things. Now, when it comes to opportunities that come by, I would use them to every single degree that they have. Like what I mean by that is if you're in a position where you don't have a lot that's coming to you, right? And like, and the opportunity comes, I would take it. Definitely would. The only thing I would try to be a little bit more aware of is this idea of sunken cost. Okay, so we know this in economic terms, but we don't know this in entrepreneur terms.
It's a hard one to let go of, especially when you're emotionally attached.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's the same concept. It's such the same concept. And most people don't see it because they know, they're like, oh yeah, I learned that in economic class, right? But think about this in that same process in the entrepreneur, like in the business that you cultivated or the people you cultivated it with. Because sunken cost can also be in the people that you work with too.
And I see it more in the time you're investing too, rather than like the money.
Yeah, that's actually funny. The first time I heard about that was from my ex, who spoke about it in terms of our relationship.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's what I heard about it. She was like, this is what I learned in economics class, sunken costs. It means that if I'm not happy with you right now, no matter if we've been together for 10 years, if this is not going anywhere anymore, then we should leave each other.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, that sounds very heartless. That's what I thought at the time. But now I'm like, oh, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Weirdly enough.
Because it's weirdly enough, like I was sitting there, we're having this conversation about it, and a lot of us think about it in the economic term.
Yeah.
But I was like, dude, think about this if you can apply this to business and when I say your relationships, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't, relationships is also partnerships, right? Because I look at all the kind of the same. But it's a huge thing. It's a huge thing. And a lot of us hold on to ideas that was ingrained in us from an older generation, right? My parents loved and wanted family businesses, right? So like if you think about because that's who they had. Who they had was their brothers and sisters. So that's why you hear the term family business.
Yeah.
Right. And everybody loves this idea, right? But unfortunately, not everybody in your family can do business.
Yeah.
Right. And the thing is this, with the vast knowledge base of things happening these days, not everybody's going to be on the same page. Right. I have different interests than my sister. It's just funny because we actually are kind of in the same, we've ended up in kind of the same markets or similar markets. But, when it first started off, it was kind of different, right? She works more on the Amazon side. I work more on the product placements where it's both marketing. One uses a different platform. So like when I first started off, Amazon was like more of our competitor because we would place, and then what you do is you subsidize, you kind of play both sides as a platform. but she was more of a competitor as a platform than it is as an ally. But that's how you think of it, right? And then a lot of companies now goes, wait, that's not a competitor, that's an ally. Place a couple, drive, you can drive traffic back and forth, right? So that's the beauty of how things expanded. But 5 years ago, we were like, oh yeah, this. If you go over to Amazon, I do this, whatever. Right? But yeah, I think that's the big portion for anybody that's out there that has these opportunities. I would take them, but I would be quick to assess them, right? And understand that sunken cost mentality.
Yeah.
And know that, is it for them? And it's okay to take a loss. I don't think I say L's, and then the L stands for lesson.
You learned that from the younger generation, took the L's?
Yes, because I always sit there, I'm like, yeah, it's a lesson for me, right? Because yeah, I just learn. I learn a lot from when people sit there and say that failed businesses and stuff. I learn a lot from them. And we used to push that terminology of fail forward.
Oh, it's a good one.
Yeah,
Fail forward.
fail forward. Yeah, so that's and we say this all the time. Like, fail forward, fail to your success, fail into your success, right? Because it's not necessarily that. If you ask any entrepreneur, you ask any kind of business owner, you can ask anybody out there, if you ask one entrepreneur and you go, have you ever failed? They'll be like, oh yeah.
That's literally what Andy came on here. So he's like, failed business,
Yeah.
success, failed business,
Yeah.
failed business, success.
Because you use them as more of learning opportunities, right? And people go, well, they get scared because what the biggest part was, like, a lot of people will come up to me and say, well, that's so risky. Like, how do you have that liberty to do all that? So you just throw things out there. I'm like, no. I'm like, here's a question. You go to Vegas, you gamble, don't you? And then they're like, yeah, we play blackjack, play this, play that, right? I'm like, businesses are the same. You just limit the risk that you want to put into it. You find yourself in a position where whatever that you're putting out there, if you lose it, then it's okay, right? That's basically what some of these businesses are. So, like, if you're going to gamble and you're saying, hey, I'm going to go with my friends for a night in Vegas, I'm going to put aside $400 or $500, $1,000. If I lose it, cool. I had a great time. I had some free drinks. I had all this other stuff. I don't really care, right? Same thing with businesses. I'm allowed to put this much money into this business. If the business does well, that's great. If I don't, I got a chance to learn how my business partners worked out, how they think, how they come up to the process, right? Put them into times of a little bit more of adversity, right? And see how they kind of come out on it. And you can learn from each other, right?
Do you guys have, so for me, when I think about that, and I've always had this kind of thought in my head, if my businesses fail, if I'm poor the next day, I have this unfounded internal belief that no matter what, I'm going to be okay because I'm going to put it in the time and effort to get back to where I was before. And I don't know if you guys have that same kind of mindset because you both have businesses, you've both been in that entrepreneurial space, but there's and me as well, but there's always that in the back of my head. No matter if I go to zero, I know that I can get back up. I know that it'll take me a while, but I know I can get there.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I failed a lot, so it's nothing new to me. And I feel like a lot of my skill set comes from the ground up. It wasn't something I picked already being skilled. So I don't think it would be an issue, especially I feel like with being a business person, a lot of it is malleability, right? You change as the time changes, just like how he spoke about MySpace. And then the next thing being Facebook or TikTok or wherever the hell it comes out to be, next 10, 20 years, everything could be ran by AI, who knows? But the idea is that I don't think none of us are stubborn enough to think that the way we do it is the way it's always be done. So I think that allows us to grow with the times, even though sometimes the vernacular might be a little bit different.
Yeah.
Such
God.
Yeah. But even then, I feel like I could very well connect with younger people because I'm always trying to understand the psychology of where things are going more so than really the disconnect between our age. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's where the markets can go. I feel like it's always gonna be dependent on trends, right? So that's why now whoever controls whatever the newest trend is gonna be the one who makes the most money or runs the biggest businesses. And sometimes, it obviously there's business as far as like you chasing a business that you're passionate about, and there's business as far as like it's a necessary need to fill in the space, because if you don't do it, someone else is gonna do it. Like last year it was crypto, this year is AI. Who knows where it's gonna go? But you have people like Andy who's combining NFTs with restaurants.
Yeah.
It's gonna happen like that sooner or later. But I think I would be able to come back.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with that. I still tell my mom because I talk to her every single morning, like on the way to work. And
Talk to your mom every single morning?
yeah.
I love
So
that. That's so sweet.
so one of the we can break into that really quick, how I got that to that point. But I tell her every single day when she asks me, she's like, "Are you worried? Da, da, da. Like, you have this house, your expense, whatever it is, right?" And I'm like, "Nope, I'm not." She's like, "Why?" I go, because Asian parents always say this. That's not just Asian parents. I think a lot of parents, they say you're lucky, right? They use the term, "Oh, you're lucky, da da da, you lucked out." I was like, "No, I'm not lucky. I earned every single piece, and I earned because I learned everything from the ground up. So my confidence sits in the fact of like, if I have my 2 hands, my 2 feet, my 2 ears, my 2 eyes, I can get back up." The same thing that you just said. So I have that confidence I can get back up. Not saying that I can't lose something. I can just get back up to where I want to be. Even the fact that like I don't always understand of say less on God, like all this other stuff, right? But the relevancy, this is one thing I know for sure. I'm still super relevant when it comes to understanding market trends.
Yeah.
Right? It's just like Andy, all those guys. I knew what an NFT was. I knew exactly where, what crypto was. Like I had to study all these things. Did I engulf myself 100% into it? I didn't, but I still sat there all day long. Like when it first dropped, I was like just reading up about every single one, because I was like, I gotta be relevant, right? This is what business is all about. So where does NFT comes in, right? And I knew there was going to be a path for NFT. I knew there was going to be a path for crypto. I just didn't know where I fit in just yet. And people tell me all this day about like, I sit there and like some of the meetings I had like just even this morning, I go, if you want to do this one's a simple one, go on ChatGPT. Right. And they're like, "Wait, what? You use that?" I'm like, "Yeah, I use it for, simple things." Right. When did you start using that? Well, I wanted to know what everybody was talking about, so I just used it for simple things. Right. But as simple as that, it's just you have to test and know what's in the market, be relevant in it, and understand. And then, as long as you didn't take shortcuts because you learned their foundation, like you said, your skill set is there. Right? Your grit's there. You can get back up every single time you're going to get back up. Right? And that's where it's going to stand 10 times more out. Right? There is different types of passion and market trends or whatever it is. Like we hit some really cool ones. Like I think one of the ones we hit was fidget spinners. That was one of the freaking.
You guys hit fidget spinners?
Yeah. Like I was sitting there, I was looking at my I was like, "You have a campaign for a product for fidget spinners?" He's like, "Yeah, dude, it did like 2 million last month." I was like, "What?" That's how well it did, right? It was like some of these, it's just trendy markets.
Yeah.
And some of the guys that I knew were like, "Dude, this is not going to last that long." My friends were like, "It won't last. It's like 6 months, man. I'm gonna jump on it if I can."
Yeah.
Right? And I was like, "Should I?" And they're like, "Nah, by the time you get on it, it's gonna be done."
Yeah.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
Usually if someone tells you about it, it's already done.
Yeah, exactly.
Typically. But it's smart people who catch on to those trends though, because some of those businesses are not meant to last.
They're not.
It's really just to capture the market for a small period of time and get out. I remember when solar eclipse was like a big thing. Like these guys started selling these glasses on Amazon just so that you could look up at the sky, and it sold a bunch, like millions.
Yeah.
Like for a couple months before that happened, and then no more glasses,
Yeah.
But it makes sense during the time. And some people work like that. I feel like some people work fast business.
Yeah.
They know when to get in and then get out, maybe possibly sell to someone else and then, do another business. That's how some people work.
And that's a business in its own.
Yeah,
It's a business.
Yeah.
It's a business model in its own.
Yeah. Yep.
Like I know a lot of my friends that sit there and they their business model is when they find a product, they know it lasts 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as that product is hitting, they're already like trying to find the next product.
Yeah.
So they're lining up products every single time, right? And it comes with restaurants. The same thing is restaurant concepts. And so as they're doing it for 6 to 8 months, 12 months. They're like, as soon as this is done, another trend's gonna come up.
That's pretty crazy because that's the complete opposite of a family business model.
Yep.
Where you're trying to be around forever, right? Pass it down decades. Yeah.
Well, you did say he was the black sheep,
Yeah, that's true, huh?
the anti-family business.
And I think that's where it has that struggle because you're trying to teach. Like it's funny because like it's harder. Sometimes I can't even teach the younger generation the trends that like I know about the trends that's happening now more than even the younger generations or younger cousins, and that's just because the desire to do the research of it. You know?
How are you finding like what leads you to find these trends? Like what kind of research are you doing?
Oh, I'm just reading and just looking what news and how things are going. So like, say for instance, okay, so I wasn't on Instagram that much when before I came over to and founded the gym. But I kept on hearing about the name. So it's a franchise. So I jumped on Instagram and freaking went down the rabbit hole. And I started to look at everybody's freaking fitness page. And I wanted to see what gym they filmed in. And every single time I would see the logos. That's how I started to do it. So when I hear about like, hey, so-and-so is, this product is hot or that product is hot, or this trend of like how people are utilizing this kind of methodology is hot, I start looking for that particular trend in social media forums or in news forums or any kind of media outlet.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm looking for, right? And that's what I'm like, and so I'll ask people, and I'll ask people too. Like a lot of our friends do like video games. Like I'll ask my friends that like, that created some of the video games, right? And they're working for some of these bigger corporations. I'm like, so how did you come? What's your mindset of doing this? And I'll pick their brains about it, and I'll chat with them about it. But also, and that's the beauty of like I think when you are asking from a position of like curiosity, you find that a lot of people are very open. Right? If there's no malintent, like, and they know it, there's an open book. And I used to go on and talk to a lot of individuals, and I still do this with all my trainers, with all the people and they talk about the businesses. They ask me of like tips and tricks and all this other stuff, and I tell them all the time, I don't mind sharing it because it's not necessarily the information that you're going to capitalize on. It's that work ethic that you actually want to put in. And it goes back to what you're just saying right now is that you have the skill set where you're like, well, I know how much I would work. I know that I can work a 6 to 6 and be very happy. I can work an 18-hour day and just be cool with it. Like I don't mind, right? I know the ability in myself. So if I wanted to start another business, I'd get infatuated into that business. And I know I'd put in an 18-hour day. The only person I have to ask is actually my wife. Other than that,
the real boss.
Yeah, yeah. Other than that, I can put in an 18-hour day. Like you'd be surprised. Like it's a different. It's something that we were. That's a big thing that our parents taught us, right? I don't know if it's going to transfer just yet.
That's what I worry about too. Because Peter and I talk about this. Like our dads, dude, work so hard, and that aspect of it transferred over to us. And like Peter works his butt off like all the time. Like I'm always working too. But it's like it's fun for me. Like I enjoy it. Part of it, obviously I'm tired and stuff sometimes, but I'm like, I don't know. It's like ingrained in me.
Yeah.
And I do want to make sure that if I do have kids, I'm like, hey, let me pass this on to you too. Like, let me make sure, like, you understand, like, because I know that every generation that has more comforts gets a little bit softer.
Yes.
You know.
Well, that's why that phrase, and I think that phrase has actually been circling around a little bit more, and I think I've had a couple people like repeat it because I told it to a couple of my friends, and then they went on shows and actually repeat it. So it's the one about hard times create tough men.
Oh,
I can't know what you
Tough
mean.
men create
Hard
easy times. Easy times create soft men.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's this generational, and it will loop back because it's cyclical. Our lives is very, very cyclical. It's gonna repeat itself. As much as we sit there and say all those different things about like you don't want history to repeat itself, it's going to repeat itself. It's just because we're not faced with the same adversities as we were before. We were looking and focused in trying to find easy ways to accommodate, and it happens. Meaning, our parents had to work 12-hour manual labor, right? So we came in and said, how do I shorten this? Not have to work manual labor, but I still was ingrained with that work ethic, but I want to make this a little easier on myself, right? Simplify it where I can speed up the process. So you work 12 hours, 13 hours, I want to work 8, right? It went too many times. And so people are now, so now you try to do 12 to 8. Someone else came in, I want to do 8 to 6. Someone came in 3, 6 to 3.
Yeah.
And it kept going down, but people are losing out on that work ethic. Because now they're like, well, if I'm going to work really hard, I only want to work 6 hours a day. And I'm like, wait, you're really working really hard, only 6 hours a day? but they were able to make shortcuts.
Yeah. I mean, Tim Ferriss made the 4-hour work week. So,
Yeah.
I mean, you can imagine how many people just read the cover and thought, damn, Michael, you work 4 hours and be like Tim Ferriss?
Yeah.
So I'm sure. I mean, I feel like that's constantly going to happen. And it goes back to the thing that you were saying about shortcuts. Everyone's trying to find a shortcut, and maybe not a shortcut as far as like the amount of hours, but at least the easeability of getting into something, because manual labor is manual labor no matter how you cut it.
Yeah.
But even then, there's certain ways to make it a little bit more bearable, right?
Yeah.
With my dad in construction, I mean, he's not working nearly as many hours anymore. He's still just as hands-on though. He's working probably 12, 14 hours now. He was working like 18 hours before. Straight up day in, day out. My dad looks like an Indian. His skin's red. He is like the labor worker. He works more than his workers, And his workers are all Mexican. They're like, damn, your dad works a lot. Like, he's crazy. He needs to take some days off. And, it's weird because maybe with Vietnamese parents, they kind of want to be hands-on with everything. They kind of want to learn from the ground up, I think that's probably where you get it from, too.
Yeah.
And, like, he doesn't, in a way, kind of trust anyone to do what he could do. So he'll be more hands-on with everything. And recently, he just did something, the craziest fucking shit. And I've seen him do crazy-ass fucking things, right? And I don't think that doing things hands-on every time is the best way, because a lot of what my parents at least have done is that once they learn it that way, they really rarely change. So I'll speak about something he just did recently, and I was like, damn, this is not safe. OSHA will come for his ass right away. But he had a tractor on another truck, and he put 2 rails to put they could roll the tractor down.
Yeah.
And I looked at the railing, it was kind of busted. And this was probably his way of like, I don't want to spend more money, Like, I don't keep these things till they fall off. And literally, as he's driving the tractor down, the rails fell off, and the tractor fell to the ground, like this high off the ground, though, luckily. But it was like this high off the ground from the top. And my dad's like driving this shit down, I'm like, holy fuck, this seems so unsafe. And luckily, he didn't get hurt, but Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's what he always does, though. He just seems to kind of keep things like the old way of doing things. And I think there is a different transition with us, is that we're actually a little bit more open-minded about things. We're like open to like newer technologies, you're opening to like making things a little bit easier. Maybe putting in the same amount of work, but not quite the same amount of effort. You know what I mean? And I think in that way, it's something that I have to like talk to him about, but sometimes it's hard because we again don't have the same vocabulary sometimes. You know what I mean? He still speaks to me in a way where it's like okay, there's definitely a disconnect. And I have to learn like, okay, maybe he doesn't mean it like that. But also, I think it's maybe an immigrant thing, but I can speak about the Vietnamese experience, and that is Vietnamese people are a little bit more harsh about the way they speak. You know what I mean? Like, I remember one of the first things I heard, I've heard multiple times after, but I remember I had a friend over when I was probably like in 5th grade or something. And my uncle looked at him and he was like, oh, tangne mapwa.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this guy's really fat, you know? And, you know, to my friend, he was just like, what the hell? He was Vietnamese too. But, you know, to my uncle, he was just saying shit. You know what I mean? It didn't really mean anything.
Yeah.
You know, but again, there's that disconnect. You know what I mean? Like, in our culture, it could totally mean something like charming or just like something like just like mentioning a certain characteristic. Nothing more. Nothing foul, nothing offensive. But, you know, where we were coming out of it, we're barely starting to learn that that's really what they were saying. You know, I remember one time, even worse than that, my stepmom said that about one of my ex-girlfriends. It's not so much that she was fat, but like she was like, "Oh, she gained a decent amount of weight, huh?" And obviously, my ex didn't take it very well.
Yeah.
She was like, "What the fuck did your stepmom say about me?" I was like, "Damn, how the hell do I explain this to her?" You
I
know?
feel like that's very common in Vietnamese culture. Like
Oh,
so
yeah,
many of
for
my
sure.
like homegirls or girls that I've dated, they always like, yeah, my mom called me fat. She says I'm eating too much or this and that. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, that never happens to like
So
us in like Latino culture.
It goes back to a cultural thing where, okay, so it's actually a methodology where they think that if you give too many praises to your child, demons will come and steal them.
What?
Yeah. So like as a younger, they would sit there in the country because like in the old country, like they would kids would get like sick and you know what I mean because like stuff like that and colds. So they would think that like if you were very good looking as a child or all that stuff and you gave them so many praises, demons and spirits would come and take them. So they would use these things where like, oh yeah, you're so ugly. You know what I mean? And
Let's demean my child.
yeah, no, but they're like, and they would sit there and say things like that, and it's really because it's kind of funny because I always joke about it, and then because I always laugh and we always make this joke about like, you know, if you're Vietnamese, you know, there's only one way that you were born, you know, you were found in the trash.
Yep,
Right. And that's like every single Vietnamese parent will sit there and tell you that. And I always joke about it. I'm like, yeah. In every single Vietnamese culture, you had like 3, you know, it's the 3 things that you can be. It's either a lawyer, a doctor or a disappointment. So which one do you want?
Yeah.
Right. But I think it has to do with some of the older kind of things that they thought you know they had to do back then, but they carried it over to over here. Right. They didn't like the fact, and they come from a culture where if you gave someone, they were afraid of being that confidence turning negative. Right. So they wouldn't praise somebody so much. So they would, you know, like they didn't really think of positive reinforcement. They didn't think of, you know, so they would speak about things that they would help you kind of like better yourself, right? Or like nag and stuff like that. And they would point out so you have like 5 of the good things, but they would point out the bad.
I don't want any demons to take you, Peter. So just letting you know you're ugly.
Okay. No wonder I have body image issues.
Yeah, and I mean, like I would hear all these stories. I'm like, what? And because I would laugh because I would hear them all the freaking time. They would be like, yeah, you know, what's the word? Maktegreka? Like your face, I hate your face. Like, yeah. And like there's like little, and it's an endearing thing, which is really funny.
Wait, what?
Yeah, like your face is like Maktegrek means like I want to hate your face.
Yeah.
Right. Like you have a face I would like to hate.
Oh, okay.
Right.
I could see myself saying that to a girlfriend.
Yeah. but it's like the way it's said is just like, wait, that you're like, that doesn't sound right.
Would you write that down for me later?
Yeah.
Hey, watch Mario become the most like verbally abusive boyfriend ever after this
But
episode.
only in Vietnamese.
Yeah. So yeah, it's one of those. I mean, it's definitely comical. I mean, I think it just comes in the culture. It comes in the really culture. Like I just had, so this happened a couple times, and I see this more in the Vietnamese culture. So recently, I had a gathering with like all my like my younger like childhood friends, right? And this same kind of thing I experienced when we went back to Vietnam and we started like hanging out with some of our family members back there too. But this is common if you ever hear about this. So what they'll do is they'll get to a table and they were sitting there. And so at this last party, someone was like, yeah, you don't know what happened to me. And they started going off and telling me a story of like, I got into a car accident and this, right? So they go into that. Next person goes, wow, that happened to you? Whoa, you don't know what happened to me. Guess what happened since you guys saw me? You know, I had a like falling out with this person, and you go around the room and everybody sits there and tells a story. And then I always sit there, and this has happened to me 2 to 3 times. I sit there and I go, this is the worst contest I've ever want to win. I don't want to win this because this is the worst contest of who has a shittier fucking life.
Yeah, we call that the trauma Olympics.
Yeah, right. And then it just literally go like, well, when you know, and they and sometimes if it's family, they do it on top of each other. Meaning like, well, when I was growing up, I had to go endure this, and then the next one goes, well, I had to endure our family, plus I had to take care of you. So it's like this added.
Yep. You hear it all the
a
time.
thing?
Yeah, dude. I've heard it from my dad since I was young. Like, it might not even be exactly like bad things, but I remember my dad was like, you know, when I started working at 5. I started working like carrying bricks from houses when I was 5 years old. I was like, damn, should have started me when I was 3 then. Let me compete. Like, Jesus Christ.
Oh, wow. I
Doing
didn't.
me a disservice by making me lazy at that point, you know? But yeah, it happens all the time, and I feel like that is part of Vietnamese culture. I think it's just a lot of Vietnamese culture is rooted in a lot of superstitions.
Yeah, superstitions. That's why the insulting of kids.
Yeah, and just the ideas, cultural ideas too. So, like, for instance, if you want to be good looking, you have to be skinny or light skinned. You know what I mean? That's a very common thing, right? So that's why they don't want you tan. In Vietnamese culture, it's bad to have an ass. So, you know, if my girlfriend's asses ever got fat, they would be like, she needs to lose weight. I'm like, no, she does not. You know, again, we grow up in different cultures, and we're starting to kind of figure out the difference between what's culturally theirs and what's culturally ours, you know? But we're raised by that, though.
Because this is the thing about like being darker skin. In Vietnamese culture, if you had darker skin,
You worked in the fields.
you work in the fields, right? In the European culture, if you were tan, you got to go on the beach. It's a different type of culture, right? In the American culture, you're like, dude, if you are pasty and pale, you didn't get to go on vacation, right? So like, I'm sitting there, I'm like, that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
That's why they desired different things, right?
Yeah. Or you take it back all the way back then, and the women who were big were beautiful because they were fed and they were rich.
Yeah.
Versus when they were skinny, they couldn't afford to eat, so they were poor.
Yeah.
And those kind of like classisms are pretty insane because there's still a lot of cultures that's very rooted in. You know, I spoke to Mayank Ipsa's brother. He's Indian, and they talk about how in their religion that you only date within your class. So, like, if you're a peon, you will never rise up to the ranks because peons only date peons, and, you know, high class, middle class people only date each other. So it still exists till today, I guess. So maybe Vietnamese culture isn't so bad, but just thinking about it, it's kind of insane because that's not really a thing in American culture as much, or at least in American culture where we have to rise up from being like of a poorer class to a higher class. I feel like that is the case when it becomes a problem of the wealthy, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like really. I think it's easier because there's this whole cultural identity in American culture from rags to riches, achieving the American dream. So it's a lot easier to circumvent that.
Yeah. I remember I had a gig out in New York. We were doing a shoot for North Shore Poke. They were opening outside of Grand Central. And the guy who opened it, he used to be a Wall Street guy. So he opened it, and I was like, oh, didn't you make enough money in Wall Street? He's like, yeah, I made plenty of money in Wall Street. And I was like, okay, so why'd you decide to open a poke shop? He was saying, oh, you know, well, my father-in-law doesn't think I'm good enough for his daughter. And I was like, but you made plenty of money. He's like, not the kind of money that he makes. So the guy came, and he was like a billionaire.
Oh.
Yeah, and he was looking around, and he was like judging the shop. He's like talking to him kind of condescendingly. I kind of saw it, you know. He was basically like, oh, so you sell fish now. And I was like, holy shit. Like, a guy who's making this much money can't even be accepted by the father-in-law, who's probably, I don't know his full story, but the family's probably been wealthy for a long time. And I feel like that is a stark difference in a lot of like billionaires because it is a generational thing for the most part. It's not too many people who come like billionaires coming out.
No, they don't.
Poor family,
Yeah.
But yeah, to hear that, I was like, damn, even they're very protective.
So, have you found any difficulty in your family, in your culture, accepting your wife since she's not Vietnamese?
Difficulties in I mean, the thing with that, I think, even though my sister's younger, I think she kind of paved the way.
Oh, which
She got married
is,
first?
Because she got married first.
And her husband
She-
is Indian, right?
Yeah, Sri Lankan. So like they got married. So but I think it's also it depends on okay. So my mom's side of the family less. My dad's side of the family a lot more. Dad's side of the family was a lot more like, hey, you got to marry a Vietnamese. You got to. It's like it's very strict to that. My mom's side of the family was a little bit less because the fact that like my grandma, her last husband was Hispanic,
Yes.
right?
wow.
So and so he had so it was just a little bit more interracial.
Yeah.
And so that was a little bit more accepted in our family. While in on my dad's side of the family, everybody was married to Vietnamese.
Yeah.
Actually, except some of my cousins, but then at the same time, it was just one of those things where, I didn't see like that's the thing. Like when you are so confused and you're so stuck on an ideology and you don't even know where it comes from, it's like not yours, right? You can't even explain it. Like what I mean by that is like I asked them what's the difference of why this, culture it means something to you. Like if my wife is Italian or what is it that that she's missing, that you want? Well, she's Italian, so she's not going to be family orientated.
What?
No, trust me. And I go, you ever heard of this thing where they call it the family? You know what I mean? It came from they had some movies about it. And then and they're like, no, they're not as family. It's just they'll come up with so many different things. They don't know about culture, or they're not the same as like how they pass down culture, and they don't believe like they're not as focused in the family. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like this is like if you look at American movies, the mafia, like all this, it's about family.
They'll kill for each other.
They'll kill for each other. Like what else are you like? So, but to them, to our parents, that culture thing, they're like, well, I can't speak, or I can't speak confidently or comfortably to them. And I'm like, but you've been in the U.S. for over 40 years, right? I could understand if you were just came over here, totally understand. But I was like, Dad, Mom, you guys speak English. Like, like your grandkids don't speak any Vietnamese. Like you speak, you speak to them in full English. Half of my cousins don't even speak Vietnamese.
Yeah.
I'm the only one, like one of the few that actually still spoke Vietnamese fluently. Most of my cousins didn't. But it was just this odd thing. They were stuck on this ideology.
Yeah.
They're like, she can't speak Vietnamese. I go, yeah, neither can my sister. So what does that mean? Like it didn't really matter. Like,
Oh, it's a good one.
Yeah, like okay. Like what does some of your own kids? They're like they'll have this ideology. You should marry a Vietnamese, but why? So they can speak Vietnamese? No, but then they can't.
I have a homegirl whose cousin got disowned by her family, by her Vietnamese family, because she dated a black man.
Damn, that's wild.
That's why I asked, because I know some families take it to more of an extreme.
No, we have it. It's happened in our family.
Oh, in your family too.
Yeah, our family. There is a couple. I wouldn't say it's pretty close to disown. Like pretty close to disown, where like the father doesn't speak to the. I mean, the kids don't speak to the parents anymore, and it's usually. I mean they can say whatever it is, and it wasn't even anything majorly different and drastic. They were just, not nothing even happened. That's that's where I think it gets to me. Is like yes, it's the race, right? You're seeing the interracial and all that stuff and mixed, but there was not even an incident. What I mean by there's not an incident is like okay, you dated a Hispanic, an Italian, black, or whatever it is, right? But that person didn't even insult you, didn't even do anything. You haven't even met the person. You just disowned them because
That's so crazy.
because you know what I mean. Like I would understand if like, oh yeah, I went to their house. I feel uncomfortable. I did this. But there was like not even an incident, right? So I'm like, so this is just but yeah, it happens, and I don't know. That's we live in America. I mean, if we compare what we have to go through here compared to, like you said, in other countries, we have it. I mean, that's why a lot of people complain all they want. Go to another country, see the stuff that you have. I heard recently there was a country that took all the dogs away.
What?
Whoa, really?
Where?
What country is that?
North Korea.
Oh,
What?
damn.
Oh, they're crazy.
Yeah, North Korea that's a whole nother can of worms.
Yeah, so I was reading up on that, and because they said that a person and a dog shouldn't have that great of a relationship.
That's my best friend right there.
Yeah, so that's why they took all the dogs away.
That's insane.
So
That's my dog. Right there.
yeah, but you know what I mean. Like little things like that. Like I just I definitely we definitely do live in a time right now that you see that more than people. It's funny because people are complaining that their voices are not being heard, but they're being heard. It's just you're not accepting that people don't agree with you.
Yeah. It's funny because the act of even being heard is like a luxury that we have. Like you go back 100, 200 years, like, bro, we're all peasants. Like the only people whose voices are heard are people who are in power.
Yeah.
The fact that we get our voices heard, that we don't live in these third world countries, that we have the luxury even complaining about not being heard or complaining at all is it is a luxury of being in this type of life. Because like I do look at the way like my parents, the way struggles they had to go to, being orphaned, living in war torn countries, and I think about that. I'm like, what do I got to complain about? Like, I got too many emails to answer today. Fuck, that sucks.
Yeah, and I think that's why the more that like. You could sit here and go on a laundry list, and I come across people all the time, and I come across people that's like I've grown up with, my family, my friends, cousins also. You can complain about everything that you want to complain about, and I get that, but look at all the things that you have, right? And if you went down that list of what you can be grateful for, it's so much bigger than the list that you can complain, right? And so I am blessed to live in a country that I can, surpass my parents.
Yeah.
Right? Like when my parents actually said that to me, I was like, this is really cool. Like that was like, and it's funny because my parents don't always, and I think it's in the Vietnamese culture, they don't say I'm proud.
That's what I was about to ask. I'm like,
they don't say I'm proud of you. They say it in a passive aggressive way. They're like, but I took that as, okay, gotcha. Right. Yeah. But the beauty of it was, like the very first time my parents have actually said that was when I had my son, right? And how I interact with him and how I focus and try to prioritize time with him. That's when my parents were like finally going, I am proud of you because you are doing something I've never, ever seen before. Everybody wants to be a business person. Everybody wants to, make money. And that's how they think, right? They think everybody wants to do that. But not everybody wants to be a father or a family person or a family man and all this other. I was like, to me, it didn't make sense because my priority was I do businesses so I can be a family man. I do businesses so I can be a husband, right? Or I have time to do those things, not the other way around.
That's one of the luxuries we have of like having like our own businesses and everything that I've always been looking forward to too. Because like I can work from home. If I have a kid, I can be there to watch all those things that maybe my father wasn't able to because he had to go and work his jobs. and I will always like try to make time to be there to like, you know, if I have a kid, because I have like the luxury of owning my own shit.
Yeah.
So it's like I'll be there at home. I don't mind being a stay-at-home husband. Like I would love that.
I don't know about that.
I like that.
I don't know about
I
that.
just work from home.
Yeah.
You're all right.
So
All right.
I can work from home, but I'll tell you this: I would not want to be a stay-at-home husband. I gotta give it to my wife. Mothers, stay-at-home moms, if they truly are a stay-at-home mom, right? I'm not talking about the moms that I'm a stay-at-home mom. I got 3 different nannies. That's
Yeah,
not,
that don't count.
that
Yeah.
I'm talking about the one that actually feeds their child, does all this. That kid doesn't matter whose kid it is, every single child. It's a lot of work. It's probably hard. It's harder to be it's harder to be a stay-at-home mom than an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
100%. And at the other side, like I've talked to all my business partners, they all sit there and say, I go to work because I don't want to be a stay-at-home dad. And they tell me all the time. Now, don't get me wrong. You'll get to you'll get to an age where the kid becomes cool.
Yeah.
Then it's like,
That's what I envision with their own.
yeah, they're like old enough, like, oh yeah, you can go play over here. Awesome. But when they're in the early stages where it's like, they don't know how to communicate. All they know how to do is cry, and they don't know what this feeling is, and all they could do is cry, kick, and scream. You're just like, you're playing this guessing game, and you're like staring at them, and I watch my wife do it, and I'm like, how the hell did you know that? Like, right? And then she's like, okay. The good part was, for me, I was like, I want to learn, so you show me. But at the very beginning, if I could see parents that, like, if you just came home, the kid would cry, and the baby would cry, but it would be one of a couple of things, right? They're hungry. They need to be changed. There's an ache, or there's something that they're hurt about, like all these things. But she like sits there and she's looking at him and she's like, this cry sounds like a hungry cry. And she runs off and gets food, and I'm like, what the hell? I'm like, how did you know that from a cry, right? And she goes, just listen. And I'm like, okay. But the funny part was, weeks later, within due time, I was like, that's a hungry cry. And she goes, perfect. She goes, you got it. Now you stay home for a bit. I'm like, no, it's okay.
That's crazy. I just ran into one of my buddies, Phil, and he was telling me that his life changed upside down since he got married and had a kid.
Phil from
the coffee shop.
from work? Okay.
Yeah. And then he was because he used to be super outgoing. He would always be at events and stuff like that. Just a crazy party animal. Successful guy too. But I ran into him recently, and he was telling me like his wife was leaving to Europe for a while. And I was like, "Oh, for what?" And he said, "For a bachelorette party." And he's like, "I'm scared." I'm like, "Why?" He's like, "Because now I got to take care of the kids alone."
Yeah.
And I was like, is she gone for a while? He's like, she's gone for a week. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm like, Jesus Christ, he made it sound like she's leaving for like a month or something like that. He's like, dude, I'm spending all this time at the coffee shop while I still can before she leaves. And I'm just like, damn, I can see the fear in his face, as if once she leaves, he'll have no idea what to do with the kid. Yeah. Like he has to learn all over again, even though he's already taking care of the kid. But I just feel like having that assistance, knowing that you're not doing it alone, really helps ease your mind. But I don't know if you ever felt like that. Have you ever had to take care of your kid by yourself?
Yeah, I have. And trust me, it's like nonstop. Like,
really?
Especially, I don't get it. Like, I'm just like, it's just like one thing after another. It's just like you keep going throughout the whole entire day. Like, at least at work or something like that, you could sit and be like, oh, I need a break, right? He's going 24, like he just goes throughout the whole entire day. And then, meaning it's like, so you get them up, feed them, right? Feed them, so you just change them, feed them, shower them, and you just do a repeat. You do it multiple times throughout the day. You play with them, and you're trying to engage them in how they play so they can learn as well. So you're not trying to stick them in front of a TV. Yeah. So when you're not trying to do that, it becomes a lot more. There's just like, dude, these kids, they get, I wouldn't say bored necessarily, but their attention span is not always there, right?
How old's your kid?
My kid's 16 months.
Okay, and you feel like that's already the case.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy, because I can imagine once a kid gets to the age where he uses like iPads and stuff.
He's already using iPads.
Oh, what?
Yeah. He's already using iPads. So he's sitting there and he's like, he'll sit there. He gets his own version of like
Baby iPad.
yeah. Well, it's just like games on it.
Learning games.
Yeah,
right?
so learning games. So he gets like a certain amount of time that's on there that he gets to play. And he sits there and he gets frustrated when he can't figure it out. It's really funny. I'm just watching him and he plays like he's literally playing freaking games. And I'm sitting there like watching him like, damn, 16 months. But we also provide like actual toys. So he has like his room that he plays, but we bring him in there. You're trying to show colors and all this other stuff. So you're bringing him through the toys. He gets bored of it quick. So he has to go through. And so we have to trick him too. Wow. So there's this way of tricking your kids, not tricking them, but like, so they pull it out. And then as they're playing with another toy, you put back this toy together. So it looks like a brand new toy. And then you kind of you kind of do them like in a circle.
Wow.
And, yeah, and it just he goes from one room to the next. He goes from the our bedroom, so he has a set of toys there that he plays with. Goes downstairs, eats, has a set of toys that he plays with. So he goes throughout the place.
We're gonna mark this as 3 tips every parent needs to know.
Yeah.
And the thing is like you don't want to stunt. And I think that's where there's just a struggle, right? Because you can make it easy. You can, if you wanted to, stick them in front of a TV. You can. And you probably can stick them, let them cry. And that's why some of these parenting styles, I'm like, what, like, someone tried to tell me about that there's a trick to get their baby to sleep like 12 hours. And I'm like, why? I don't get it. Like, why do you do that? Right? But all these different things, it is very, because like, you got to give it to these moms. They know exactly, not know exactly. They learn just as much as us. They just do studies just as much as us. It's just like how when you had passion about something, infatuated with something, you learn it from start to finish. You understood every single piece. But at least some of those were by choice. Some of these, the mothers, they want to be a good mom. They actually go into it and really do. And the thing about my son is that he's not a small baby. He's a pretty, I would say he's a dense boy, right? And
Dense boy.
Yeah. So he's like, he weighs as much as his cousin that's 2 years old. Dang. Right? But he's tall and lengthy. So my wife is like trying to hold him. And she like, even when she passes him off, like so this is how we know. So she was holding him. And my mom would be like, yeah, I hold babies all day, all the time. Because she has my niece and my nephew, right? So she holds my son. She holds him for like 20 minutes or something, 10, 15 minutes. She goes, he's heavier. And then we're like, really? She's like, he's just dense. And then we're like, but he's not like chubby. He's just dense. The kid's just like when we were taking pictures of him without a shirt, it looks like he has muscles everywhere. I don't know, but it's just really funny. But
go to the gym.
Yeah. But she's like throughout the day, there's bubbles, there's chalk, there's all these things. She's engaging him also. I can see where your friend is like, what do I do? Mm-hmm. Because you're talking about 10, 12 hours straight of doing that. It's like, and you're literally cycling through. And the funny thing is you're like, oh yeah, they sleep, they take naps. Nah, dude, you catch them on the wrong day, that's a 20-minute nap. So your 12 hours, you only got 30. It's like freaking going to work at a warehouse.
Let's give a shout out to all the moms out there. Holding it down at home, working those 14-hour warehouse hours.
Yeah.
Oh, I did want to ask. You said you call your mom every day?
Yes.
Why?
Okay, so early on, when I came over, we were trying to life hack. My business partner, he loves to life hack everything, right? And so he brought in one of our friends is Jim Quick, and we were trying to life hack a couple of different things. And I was sitting there and telling him, he's like, what would you want to do? And I go, I really want to build a relationship with my mom. Like, as I'm getting older, I always hear people talk about like on their deathbed, they don't sit there and say, they always say something like, I wish I spent more time with this. I spent more time, what I mean? They don't ever sit there and like, I wish I made another dollar. You know what I mean? So as I'm thinking of those things, and she lives in Vegas. So I sat there and I'm like, okay, well, I don't get to see her as often, but how do I do certain things? And I started looking at it, and we're trying to life hack the process of what I was doing every single morning. So I was writing down like, okay, I go in and pick my clothes, I do my hair, I do this. We're looking at the time. So I sat there and I said, well, I don't really care what t-shirts I wear. I don't really care what pants I wear. What I really care about, like the color, also I didn't care about it. What I really cared about was how the shirt fit or made me feel. And the pants, when I put on, I didn't like it, like it was baggy or whatever it is, right? So the way that I did it is when we started to kind of like the Mark Zuckerberg kind of process, and what's his name from Apple?
Cook? Tim Cook or just Steve Jobs?
Steve Jobs. So I started buying all black t-shirts. So I started wearing all black t-shirts, all the same cut, pants, same thing. And I was like, I want to see how much time I shave off.
Oh.
Right? So I started shaving and hacking that. Then another thing I started seeing was the fact that like I was getting, because we live in California, I get very antsy and I get very anxiety when I'm in traffic.
Oh,
Yeah.
Right. And so I was listening to music, I was listening to all these other things, and it wasn't helping my mentality or my mental state. So I then was like, okay, well, I need to create a different type of source. So I said, if I can save 10 minutes here, 15 minutes here from my picking, not having to pick out clothes, doing my hair, all that stuff, what would I rather spend that on? And then I started choosing, hey, I want to build, and my big priority was build a better relationship with my mom. So then that's how I turned.
I love that.
So then I just said, okay, if I can do this, I'll spend every 15 minutes, every single time, every day, and just talk to my mom. So every single morning when I'm driving to work or something like that, I'm just talking to her on the phone. And it's just simple conversations. It's just, just how my day was, how was her day, what she's looking, she's doing and so forth like that.
Was there a barrier to do that? Like, did you find it difficult to start that? Like, did it feel uncomfortable for you to like make that first call?
It wasn't uncomfortable to make that first call. It was making it into a routine and consistency. Okay. It's the laziness that overcomes you.
Yeah.
Because so this is what would happen. Like I would call, first one, went well, great. Next day I was rushing. I forgot to call the minute I got into the car. So now the ride is only half. Right. And then you're like, well, it's kind of like you're going to the gym in the morning and you had like an hour to go to the gym. All of a sudden you had a couple more things to do and now you only have 30 minutes left to go to the gym. It doesn't matter. The whole point is just be consistent about it. Right. So if I talk to her and I get on the call with her, I just be like, hey, I totally spaced out. I forgot to call you. Start chatting with her. When I get to work, she knows I get to work because it's the consistency. All you're doing is more and more and more. And it's practice. The more that you do with it, it's the more you're going to practice it. Sometimes you start off with talking about the big topics, right? And when I'm being about big topics, it's just like everyday stuff. Like big topics mean like gossips of the whatever it is, right? And then you get so granular, and then you start going like more micro. Like, how is your day? And it's not the weird small talk anymore. It's the very like you start to get deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, right? And that opens up a lot. And then every incident that comes along, you can, start having conversations about it. How did it make you feel? Right? Oh, I said this. Oh, I'm sorry. You know what I mean? And truly being sorry. It's truly spending time to talk about like things that you would do. And that you like conversations about, let's say, for instance, what if I wanted a child or not? Right? This was early on, right? So if I was thinking about kids and not your 2-minute that you saw your mom or your grandparents at a family Christmas party and they asked you, so you did this elevator pitch of why you want a kid or not, really diving in there and talking about what would you do? How would you do it? Like all this different stuff. And I even told her, this is where I was starting to open up. I said, I have a fear of having a kid. Why? Because I didn't have the best role model. Dad wasn't always there. I don't know, he did his best, But as a father, I don't know if I'm so stuck into business. Am I going to be available there? Like, I don't want to repeat this cycle and then create another, resentful kid that will like kind of grew up and then didn't find his way till later, right? Do I want to do that? Stuff like that,
Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah.
And yeah, it gets deeper and deeper and deeper. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait, my mom's my best friend? That's weird. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're like, yeah. It kind of, but you have to, it's like this. You have to build the space for it to actually even exist.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like in business that it's the same thing. Right. Because a lot of people will be like, oh yeah, when we get there, we'll move into a bigger office. Right. Watch how it takes forever to do that. But if you move into a bigger office and you go, okay, now I have this space, how do I fill it? Watch your creativity and your eagerness to fill that space, right? Same thing with like when I was talking to my mom. Like when I created the space, that platform, I knew every single day that I was gonna get this certain amount of time with her. And I'm gonna have this conversation. She knew it. She looked forward to it. It was great. It was amazing. Because she started looking forward to it. And then when I missed a couple of days, she's like, are you sick? You know what I mean? It was like really funny about it. But just had that conversation. And she would tell me about her day. She would do all that stuff. And then, it just naturally, when you build the space, you filled it up. And you got an opportunity to go deeper and you got another opportunity. And it's not like you go deep all of a sudden the very first month, every single freaking day. You just found your windows, And I went as far back as I've talked to my mom about my depression, of anxiety, of what I had to go through, the mental states that I was when I was a child. I started it off with, please understand, I'm going to speak about something that happened before. I'm not in that space anymore, so do not tie fear into this, So I have to create all that stuff. But I told her pretty much everything down to this, to the T of like different things and then she started to understand why, I had outburst or I had incidents or whatever occurrences that, my obstacles in my life. Because she didn't understand it. She was like, oh, every kid gets in trouble. Every kid gets kicked out of school. Every kid gets put in jail. Every kid, I don't know. Like it just goes down the laundry list, right? She thought every kid does this stuff. No, not every kid does that stuff, right? But then now she understands. She, at least understands. Doesn't mean she accepts it, but at least she understands to a degree, It really opened the thing. And so I really highly tell everybody if someone is, and I really suggest that, it's probably one of the best things I've ever, decision I've ever made in my life, right? It's created something where I will not be on my deathbed and going, well, I wish I spoke to my mom a couple more times. And here's the other thing. It's given me more opportunities to say I love you, because Asian culture, Hispanic culture, Peruvian culture, a lot of them, doesn't matter. When you're a male, you don't say those words as often as you should, especially to other males. Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. We just don't utilize those as much.
True.
I'm gonna call my grandma tomorrow. I feel inspired, and honestly, I hope like other people like listening to this like take something from that, because we do have people come on here talk about family, and you don't want to be on your deathbed regretting not getting closer to your dad, mom, sibling. That's one of these trends that we see with almost everyone who comes on here, and me and Peter have both taken that from other people and like trying to work on our own families too. So thank you for sharing that, because I do feel more inspired to like, not only just like I am going to call my grandma, but I'm going to try and talk to my mom a little more too, because I know that we get stuck in these day-to-day lives where I see her all the time and we have, normal conversation, but we don't go deeper than that, and you telling me it's like, oh, she became your best friend, and I'm like, oh, okay, I gotta take some steps. I always go up and down with these. Like, we hang out now all the time. We hang out every Sunday now as a family, but we're not at that level where we're like reaching deep down again. And then it is these pockets of window. You don't need to do it deep all the time. Like, there's these windows and stuff where we do have really good conversation. But you inspire me. I'm like, I'm gonna try and talk to my mom a little more. Like,
Dedicate that time for her.
yeah.
That makes the difference, right? Because when you see, and we don't think this, but it is reality. It's kind of like this. When you're seeing each other on the weekend, right? Or the Sunday or whatever it is, or a family event, it's not only about them. It's the whole entire group. So you naturally, just being a good host, you're going to talk to multiple different people. Your mom's your mom. Your grandma's your grandma. If you sat there and said, I value you so much, I love you so much that you deserve a time in, like, just you, right? Because reverse, like I was saying about these my wife, with the way that she's all about my son. Like, that's 10 hours just him. She's not sitting there doing anything else. This is like what he wants to do. She's putting that time. And I know my mom's putting that time as well when I was younger, right? So it's just natural for me to sit there and say, I don't mind. I actually, makes me feel better too. Also, I get to talk to the person that I love, not having to worry about this car cutting me off or the other car. Like, you know what I mean? So when you go in, and the other part too, so before my wife, before my kids, before my family, the big turning point for me of understanding why I wanted to succeed in business was finding my why. So when I first thought about this, when I used to think money was my why, I never earned enough about it, right? Because that was a horrible purpose. When I knew that my mom and my sister was my why, then I started to flourish. So another real big reason why I talk to my mom every single day is, think about if you were right before you're going to work, right before you went to your business, you're reminded of your why right before you went in. That sets the tone for the rest of the freaking day, right? And it's just, that's the whole thing, right? So it worked well for me. It's exactly what I wanted. So every single day I just get reminded. So when someone comes in and goes, "Hey, guess what happened today?" I'm like, "What happened?" Right? This da 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 da. Okay, cool. All right, let's deal with it. Yeah. Right? You're not going in there abruptly, like all changing and all this stuff. And the funny thing is this, like you mentioned, we work in this new age. Facebook marketing, social media marketing. If you didn't come, there was a period where I'd come in. If Facebook didn't lose all their accounts or shut down or did this, and that wasn't normal to us, right? We're like, what happened today, right? But that's just the reality of what, if you can play that risk, you actually get a lot of back rewards.
Shit, man.
Thank you.
All right, guys, welcome back to Lightning Round, where we ask our guests some rapid fire questions. If they don't answer on time, they got to drink their water. All right, Adam, are you ready?
Yeah.
3, 2, 1. What's your favorite color?
Blue.
Who made the first move, you or your wife?
My wife.
Pickup line?
No, she just asked to go to have dinner.
Oh, yeah, that's nice.
Yeah.
Who inspires you?
Shoot. Truthfully, everybody around me.
Okay.
Nice.
The last time you were sad?
Probably last week.
If you were any kind of animal, what animal would you be?
Tiger.
That was so quick.
That was very fast.
Why a tiger?
It's my spirit animal, and I have it tatted all over me.
All right, sick. What's something that you regret?
Not reaching out to family members more.
If you could change one thing about yourself, what would it be?
I wouldn't really change anything about myself.
Favorite food?
Shoot. Fried chicken.
If you were a DJ, what would your name be?
DJ AM.
What's a piece of advice you can give to people out there who are, starting their business or trying to be entrepreneurs? Something that's, important to you.
Be in the now and be more focused with their time.
And
people tend to confuse busy day with like busy work, right? With actually like that, I think that's what a lot of people like confuse itself. I'm like, so someone will be, and I get it. A lot of times we talk about like if you really want to like have grit, entrepreneur, wake up at 5 a.m. It's a 5 a.m. club. Wake up at 5 a.m. Work all the way to the middle of the night. But if your time is not focused, it's all busy work.
Yep.
And if it's not geared to a particular goal that you want, you'll never reach that goal because 20 minutes did this, 30 minutes did that, 20 minutes did this. It doesn't push the envelope. Straight line method doesn't go straight. You're pushing 5 different things towards that thing every single day. When I say be in the now, that means if you want to focus on something on your business, phones away, no texting, no nothing, just focus on that very specific thing. Be present and really focus on it. I can schedule, and I've known this, and I've done this myself as a test, where I had a weekly scheduled or every other day scheduled for an hour for a particular project of mine, right? And went weeks without major movement. And then I made a decision, recommitted, and said, do I want this? And I said, I really do want this. It took me 2 hours to complete it. And I spent 2 months every other day. So that's maybe 3 to 4 days a week, an hour, but it wasn't focused. It wasn't committed.
Yeah.
So I would maybe get distracted by something else. But every other day on my calendar, it said that particular project. Mm-hmm. And it took me 2 hours to complete the project and to actually make it to fruition and actually make money off of it.
Nice.
Yeah. But that's the power of focus, power of now.
And my last question is, what's one goal that you have for this year that you're looking forward to completing?
My goal for this year, to help another individual, just one.
I'm right here.
Yeah. I think that's every year. Every single time that I have is, I love the people around me. I'm always, I think the biggest thing was when I asked my mentor, which is Peter, I asked, how do I repay you? His biggest thing was pay it forward.
Yep.
Because he was like, just pay it forward. So I join, when people ask me certain things, I always give them the benefit, and I just say yes. And I give them the benefit of the doubt. And I also, that's why I spend my time with other people that's in businesses, entrepreneurs, all this. And also I enjoy it. I enjoy when it's an intelligent conversation with, others. I also enjoy the fact of bringing other men out of their shell, right? I went as far as trying to get certified in, I'm a practitioner in a lot of these things for NLP and all that stuff, where I get to talk to my closest friends and we talk about like guy stuff. Like when I say guy stuff, I'm talking about like guy emotions and feelings and stuff like that and blockages that we've had for so many freaking years, where guys are sitting there saying, well, I didn't know how to cry.
Yep.
Like I just saw so-and-so on their deathbed and I didn't even shed a tear.
Yeah, I've seen that.
And I was like, what? What do you mean? To the flip side of what they've, where like you've getting these guys just like, I was the same way, right? And now when I hear stories and I hear people talking and I hear breakthroughs and stuff, I cry myself because I'm just happy to see where their progress, their commitment, and their at the end of the day, there's just they're in a much better place. So that's really every single. I think the joy comes into like that's just the main focus every single day. Yeah, and most of the things we do is we're always trying to bring more awareness to these things. That was the biggest. If I can do that, all the other businesses like all the other stuff, it's just that's what it serves for.
Yeah.
To create more platforms, to have more interactions with people, to have more connections with other men, have connections with, also other friends and family and all this other stuff. Because I don't think enough men out there feel the support of other men. When I say that, I mean especially in the business world, because everybody feels that they're in competition.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that sucks. That sucks to feel successful or like you're getting success and no one is there to celebrate it with you. It feels shitty. Right. And the people that are, like just even the small win or whatever it is. Right. But the more that I see it, the more that, I've experienced it, the more that it can spread. I think that's just, I love that. I just love seeing that fruit kind of like, planted seeds and stuff like that flourish.
If there's one moment in your life that you can relive, what would that be?
Probably my son's birth.
Oh, wow.
I was actually pretty scared of that, to be quite honest with you. I was like, I don't want to be in the delivery room. I don't want to be, but it's some funny ass stories in that fucking room. They thought I was gonna pass out. But yeah, because I was breathing with my wife. You know how you do the breathing? I was breathing with her. And they all turned and looked at me and like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah." But yeah, because I'm so glad I was a part of it, because I actually said, "Nah, I'm just gonna stay in the waiting room."
Wow.
I wasn't gonna experience it. I'm not gonna see it. So yeah, very glad that I definitely got the chance to experience that.
Nice. What's one moment in the future that you're looking forward to?
My daughter.
Oh, I was about to ask you if you want a daughter. But
Yes, we found out we have a daughter. She is due in November.
Oh, on the way. Nice. Congrats. What's one thing that you want your kids to experience that you experienced?
The closeness to their siblings and cousins and family. That's definitely, for me, I was raised, like I spoke about before, my father was a little absent at time. I was raised by my aunts. So 5 very strong individuals. So I always felt loved from them. I would love for my kids to experience that and to understand that. And I know they are. And I think that's why I'm so excited about them being here, because they already experienced that.
Yeah.
Because I think I mentioned a little bit earlier that all our business partners and friends, we all live in like this same neighborhood. So we live in a cul-de-sac in Villa Park. So one, it's great because you have so many babysitters. 2, like he comes over there and literally like every auntie of his wants to play with him and spend time with him. So he just has fun. So I love it.
Nice. What's the first sport you're going to put your kid to?
First sport? Okay. There's a huge debate on this.
Basketball.
Yeah. So for me, I grew up in high school playing football and basketball. My wife she grew up playing, she's all about
Soccer.
baseball.
Oh, wow.
So she was a catcher. Her sister was a pitcher. Their brother was I think also an outfielder. He was a pitcher too. Our nephew is a pitcher. So they all play baseball. Their family's all baseball.
Wow.
Even some of their family members are playing for the Anaheim Angels right now too. So we're a huge football and basketball. I would love, he's already experiencing all the sports. So at 16 months, he's already been to a 49ers game.
Oh, wow.
He's already been to a Lakers, and then he's always been to a Kings game.
Oh, nice.
Several Kings games. So we'll continue that and see what sport he likes. Oh, he's already been to a Dodgers game too.
Jeez.
He becomes a Clippers fan.
Yeah. But
You're like your biggest nightmare.
yeah.
His own.
Yeah. Well, the big thing that we said was I made an agreement with my wife. I go, whatever sport he's in, if you want him a certain sport, you need to take him if you like that sport.
Yeah.
So like, I don't like watching baseball.
Yes.
Same.
It's so boring.
It's boring to watch.
It's so boring.
It is boring to watch. It is cool when you go there and you have drinks and it's a whole atmosphere. But yeah, I don't get excited when I watch baseball.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Game of choice in Vegas.
Game of choice. I don't gamble anymore.
Oh.
I
What
stopped
about when
gambling.
you did?
Baccarat.
Baccarat. Really?
Yeah, I was family thing. We're
Talking to the right person.
Yeah, we
there.
are. We're all addicted to gambling in our family.
I can tell because Julia is. That's
Yeah.
why.
So all our uncles are addicted to gambling. So is my father. That's why I quit. So I was, I think, in my I was already gambling at like 18 all the way to like my mid 20s. And I would go with him for days on end playing baccarat, losing, like we would come there with cars, leave without cars.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was a huge thing that I knew it was going to take over my life. So I made a promise or not a promise. I just made a thing to me. I said I had to quit cold turkey. So I'm completely cold turkey. Like I don't even play slot machines.
I wish we had talked about that.
Yeah.
I swear it's a Vietnamese thing. Like,
Yeah. But I don't get me wrong. I love just watching and it's because there's the statistics, the numbers.
yeah,
to
you
it.
do.
What would be another business you like to open?
I think more into possibly some more stuff into real estate right now. Commercial real estate again. There's a couple different new, no, I wouldn't say new, opportunities at the door at the moment, and I'm still kind of vetting them out. But it is into a lot of our stuff. A lot of my stuff kind of revolves around the fitness world. When I say fitness world is like, yes, of course, the gym, but also for the warehouse and the contract manufacturing, I do supplements. So like muscle supplements, vitamins, and all this other stuff. So health, right? So we've always been in health and beauty for quite some time. There's other things that's coming in that fitness side. One big one is I've been wanting to get back into the digital offer space. That might be something that, because I remember I was doing the credit reports from that. Yeah. So something in fitness and maybe coming back in that realm.
What is one thing that you've said that you still regret till today?
I don't know the exact words, but it was something where I lost my temper, and I don't even know if it's the words because I don't know if I said it, but I'm more about that process. So what I mean by that is it's the thought process I had in that moment. I had an argument with my parents, or it was my mom, and at one point I sat there and I said, if she doesn't realize or she doesn't, I might not talk to her again. That same kind of thought process, like you're so stubborn in your way, and you sat there and like, well, this is, I'm just not going to call her anymore, right? Yeah, that thought process. So I don't know exactly because it was so anger driven. So I don't know specifically what I said, but it was a lot of cussing, a lot of like go F yourself type of thing. But I just I don't remember those words, but I remember the feeling and the thought process because at that one moment, the most immature moment that I can think of, I sat there and I was like, I played around with the idea that if I don't resolve this, I might not talk to my mom again. And I was like, now I think I'm like, no, that never happened.
Now you're best friends.
Yeah. And most of it is just communication, man.
Yeah. All right, guys, that concludes our lightning round. I want to say thank you to our amazing guest, Adam. That was so fun. Let us know where we can find you.
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Adam Mai 22. It's just my personal handle. Yeah, you can find all of my businesses and all this other stuff. If you have any questions on those, you can find it on my Instagram right there.
And thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you, Adam, for sharing all those pieces of advice, especially in how for men to communicate to each other. And make sure you guys like, subscribe, and comment below what you guys want us to talk about next. And remember,
Live fast and eat ass.